Granite outlived kingdoms, yet still guards impossible secrets. Precision appears where limitation should reign. Entire worldviews tremble before silent relics that refuse ordinary interpretation. Piece by piece, accepted narratives loosen their grip. Stay a while. Each discovery deepens the mystery, transforming wonder into fascination and fascination into obsession. Morning mist often settles gently across the limestone plateau of southwestern Crimea, softening the sharp edges of towering cliffs that have watched centuries pass in silence. Rising above deep valleys, Eski-Kermen appears less like a ruined city than a landscape shaped by intention itself. From a distance, the pale rock seems almost natural, but a closer look reveals doorways, staircases, windows, storage chambers, and halls carved directly into the living stone. The entire plateau feels suspended between the natural world and human imagination, where architecture merges seamlessly with the mountain. Founded during the early medieval period, most historians believe Eski-Kermen emerged around the 6th century during the Byzantine era. Its elevated position offered remarkable defensive advantages, allowing inhabitants to monitor the surrounding valleys while protecting vital routes that crossed the Crimean Peninsula. Over time, the settlement expanded into a thriving, fortified town. Archaeological evidence suggests that hundreds of cave rooms served many purposes, from homes and workshops to wine presses, granaries, chapels, and military posts. Surface buildings once stood alongside these rock-cut spaces, creating a complex urban environment that stretched across the plateau. Walking through Eski-Kermen today reveals a city designed with surprising sophistication. Narrow streets weave between carved structures. Rainwater collection systems demonstrate careful planning in an environment where every resource mattered. Defensive walls once guarded the approaches, while lookout positions offered commanding views in every direction. Even after centuries of erosion, the craftsmanship remains unmistakable, preserving details that hint at the daily rhythms of a forgotten community. Yet, many aspects of the settlement continue to invite deeper investigation. Some chambers contain niches whose precise functions remain uncertain. Others feature unusual layouts that differ from ordinary domestic spaces. Certain rooms seem carefully aligned with natural light, allowing sunlight to enter only during particular moments of the day. Were these simply practical architectural choices, or did they carry symbolic or ceremonial meaning? Archaeologists generally favor functional explanations, but not every feature fits comfortably within familiar patterns. Religious life also leaves subtle traces across the plateau. Several cave churches preserve faded carvings and fragments of early Christian decoration. Their simplicity reflects the spiritual traditions of the region, yet the placement of some sanctuaries raises intriguing questions. Why were certain sacred spaces positioned deep within the rock while others overlooked the surrounding landscape? Did these locations serve purely liturgical purposes, or were they chosen for reasons now lost to time? The city's decline appears connected to the Mongol invasions of the late 13th century, when many settlements throughout Crimea experienced destruction or abandonment. Burned layers uncovered during excavations support this interpretation, suggesting a violent end to what had once been a flourishing community. Even so, the archaeological record cannot reconstruct every moment of its final years. Silence fills the spaces where written accounts are absent. Beyond established history, Eski-Kermen has naturally attracted more speculative interpretations. Some visitors wonder whether its extensive network of carved rooms conceals undiscovered passages sealed by collapse or deliberate design. Others suggest that hidden chambers may still preserve manuscripts, religious artifacts, or valuables concealed during times of crisis. A few propose that the city's unusual geometry reflects astronomical knowledge or forgotten traditions passed between distant cultures. These ideas remain unproven, Yet they persist because the landscape itself encourages imagination without offering definitive answers. Standing on the plateau as the wind moves through empty windows carved centuries ago, it becomes easy to understand why Eski-Kermen continues to inspire both careful scholarship and enduring mystery. Every carved doorway opens into another question. Every weathered staircase leads toward another possibility, leaving the ancient city suspended between what history has already uncovered and what the stone may still choose to conceal. If Eski-Kermen reminds us that entire cities can disappear while leaving their outlines etched into stone, the next destination suggests something even more intimate. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not built by human hands, but entrusted to the quiet darkness of the earth itself. Far from towering cliffs and fortified settlements, another place has preserved a different kind of history, one measured not in walls, but in silence. Hidden within the rugged hills of southern Spain, Los Murciélagos cave opens like an ordinary limestone cavity, its entrance partially concealed by vegetation and weathered rock. At first glance, there is little to distinguish it from countless other caves scattered throughout the region. Cool air drifts steadily from its interior, carrying the faint scent of damp stone that has remained largely unchanged for thousands of years. Yet, beyond the entrance lies a chamber that has become one of Europe's most remarkable archaeological discoveries, preserving an extraordinary glimpse into prehistoric life. The cave first attracted widespread attention during the 19th century when mining activities unexpectedly exposed human remains and ancient artifacts resting deep inside. What emerged from the darkness surprised even experienced scholars. Bodies had been naturally preserved by the cave's exceptionally dry conditions, accompanied by woven baskets, wooden implements, sandals crafted from plant fibers, cords, and other organic objects that rarely survive the passage of millennia. Radiocarbon dating later revealed that some of these artifacts were astonishingly old. Several belonged to communities living thousands of years before written history, while others dated to later prehistoric societies that returned to the cave over generations. The preservation was so exceptional that archaeologists could study techniques of weaving, basket making, and textile production in remarkable detail. Every strand seemed to preserve the fingerprints of forgotten craftspeople whose names disappeared long before recorded history began. The sandals discovered inside the cave have attracted particular attention. Carefully woven from esparto grass, they demonstrate an unexpected level of sophistication. Their construction required planning, experience, and an intimate understanding of natural materials. Rather than crude footwear assembled for temporary use, they reveal skilled craftsmanship passed through generations. They quietly challenge the familiar assumptions about the technological abilities of Europe's earliest farming communities. Equally fascinating are the baskets themselves. Some appear tightly woven for practical storage, while others display patterns whose purpose remains uncertain. Were these decorative choices, symbols carrying cultural meaning, or simply expressions of individual creativity? Without written records, certainty remains beyond reach. The objects continue to speak, but only through materials and craftsmanship rather than language. The human remains introduce another layer of mystery. Archaeologists generally interpret the cave as a burial site used repeatedly over long periods. Bodies were carefully placed alongside personal belongings, suggesting deliberate funerary customs rather than accidental deaths. The surrounding artifacts hint at beliefs concerning memory, identity, or perhaps an existence beyond death. Yet, the exact ceremonies once performed within these chambers have disappeared entirely. Questions naturally emerge from the cave's unusual preservation. Why was this particular location selected for burial when other shelters existed nearby? Did the darkness itself hold spiritual significance? Was the cave regarded as an entrance into another realm, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead felt less distinct. Similar practices appear throughout prehistoric Europe, yet each site possesses its own unique character, resisting simple explanation. The cave also preserves evidence of changing climates and shifting human societies. Different layers reveal repeated visits separated by centuries, suggesting that successive communities recognize the location as significant long after its earliest use. Whether knowledge passed directly between generations or was rediscovered independently remains uncertain. Memory itself leaves few archaeological traces. Beyond mainstream interpretation, Los Murciélagos has inspired more speculative possibilities. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have wondered whether the remarkable preservation reflects environmental conditions not yet fully understood. Others have suggested that the cave's repeated use points to an enduring sacred landscape whose deeper symbolism has been lost. A handful of fringe theories even propose hidden chambers that remain sealed beyond explored passages, containing additional burials or ritual objects untouched since prehistory. To date, none of these ideas has been confirmed, yet they continue to circulate because the cave still holds unanswered questions. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Los Murciélagos is not any single artifact, but the fragile survival of ordinary things. Sandals that once crossed rough ground, baskets that carried food or harvests, ropes twisted by careful hands. These humble objects have outlived kingdoms, languages, and entire civilizations. They offer an unusually personal connection to individuals whose voices disappeared thousands of years ago, allowing their daily lives to emerge with unexpected clarity. As light gradually fades toward the deeper recesses of the cave, the silence begins to feel almost deliberate. Every preserved fiber, every carefully arranged burial, and every untouched corner suggests that the earth has not revealed everything entrusted to it. Perhaps the greatest discovery within Los Murciélagos is not what has already been uncovered, but what still waits patiently in darkness, beyond the reach of modern certainty. If caves preserve the quiet traces of individual lives, fortresses preserve the ambitions of entire civilizations. Leaving the cool darkness of Los Murciélagos behind, the journey now carries us into an altogether different landscape, where endless plains stretch toward shimmering horizons, and the remains of a forgotten stronghold still command the silence around them. In the vast deserts of ancient Khwarezm, in present-day Uzbekistan, the weathered walls of Janbas Kala rise unexpectedly from the barren earth. Seen from above, its nearly rectangular outline appears deliberate and imposing, as though drawn with remarkable precision against the surrounding emptiness. Winds sweep uninterrupted across the plain, carrying fine layers of sand that have slowly softened the fortress without ever erasing its unmistakable form. Even after more than 2,000 years, Janbas Kala remains one of the most impressive surviving fortifications of Central Asia. Most historians believe the fortress was constructed sometime between the 4th and 3rd centuries BC as part of the expanding Khwarezmian civilization. At the time, this region depended upon an intricate network of irrigation canals that transformed an otherwise unforgiving environment into productive farmland. Janbas Kala was strategically positioned to defend both agricultural settlements and vital trade routes linking distant communities across Central Asia. Rather than standing in isolation, it belonged to a wider system of fortified cities that guarded the prosperity of an entire kingdom. Approaching the fortress reveals engineering that remains striking even today. Massive mud brick walls, once reinforced with towers placed at regular intervals, enclosed an orderly interior. Narrow passageways allowed defenders to move efficiently along the ramparts while exposing attackers to concentrated fire from elevated positions. Every element reflects careful military planning, demonstrating that its builders possessed considerable knowledge of defensive architecture. Yet, despite its obvious strength, Janbas Kala did not remain occupied indefinitely. Archaeological evidence suggests that the settlement experienced periods of prosperity before eventually being abandoned. Fragments of pottery, weapons, household objects, and architectural remains provide valuable glimpses into daily life, but they do not fully explain why such a formidable fortress ultimately fell silent. Was it conquered through warfare? Did shifting rivers gradually deprive nearby communities of water? Or did changing political alliances simply render its strategic importance obsolete? The surrounding landscape offers important clues. Ancient canals that once sustained thriving fields have long since dried, leaving only faint traces visible from aerial surveys. Entire settlements that depended upon these waterways disappeared as environmental conditions changed over centuries. In this respect, Janbas Kala serves as a reminder that even the strongest walls cannot protect a civilization from transformations unfolding beyond human control. Excavations have uncovered evidence of organized urban life within the fortress. Residential buildings, storage facilities, workshops, and communal spaces suggest a population accustomed to routine rather than constant conflict. The fortress functioned not merely as a military outpost, but as a living community where merchants, artisans, soldiers, and families shared the rhythms of everyday existence. Behind its imposing defenses unfolded countless ordinary moments that archaeology can only partially reconstruct. Even so, certain aspects of Janbas Kala continue to invite careful reflection. Some architectural features differ subtly from neighboring fortresses, leading researchers to debate whether the site evolved through multiple construction phases or reflected regional innovations in military design. The exact relationship between Janbas Kala and other nearby strongholds also remains an active subject of study. Were they governed centrally as parts of a coordinated defensive network, or did each fortress exercise considerable local independence while responding to common threats? Beyond established scholarship, the fortress has naturally attracted more speculative interpretations. Some visitors have wondered whether unexplored sections beneath the collapsed structures conceal hidden storage chambers or administrative archives sealed during times of crisis. Others point toward the remarkable geometric planning of the fortress, suggesting that its orientation may have reflected astronomical observations alongside military practicality. A few fringe theories even imagine that the surrounding desert still conceals entire companion settlements buried beneath centuries of accumulated sediment, waiting to emerge through future archaeological surveys. None of these ideas has been demonstrated, yet the immense scale of the region leaves room for continued exploration. Standing atop the surviving walls at sunset, it becomes easier to appreciate the strategic vision of those who chose this isolated plateau. The horizon extends in every direction without interruption. Distances seem almost immeasurable. It is easy to imagine watchmen scanning the plains for approaching travelers, merchants arriving with caravans, or distant signals passing from fortress to fortress across a landscape that once supported flourishing communities. Today, only the wind moves freely through the empty enclosure. The towers no longer guard the frontier they were built to defend, and the people who planned every brick have long since faded into history. Yet, Janbas Kala continues to endure, quietly challenging simple narratives about the rise and decline of ancient civilizations. Its walls remain standing just high enough to remind us that every abandoned fortress still keeps part of its story beyond reach, waiting for the next discovery to reveal whether the desert has truly surrendered all of its secrets. If abandoned fortresses remind us how civilizations can fade while their walls continue watching the horizon, the next destination invites a different kind of mystery. Here, nature itself appears to have become an architect, sculpting forms so improbable that later generations transformed them into places of ritual, legend, and enduring wonder. High on the sandstone plateau of northeastern Thailand, Phrabat Historical Park unfolds across a landscape unlike almost any other. Massive balancing rocks rise unexpectedly from the forest floor, some resting delicately upon narrow stone pedestals, others leaning at impossible angles as though suspended in defiance of gravity. Weather and time have patiently carved these formations over millions of years, producing arches, mushroom-shaped pillars, overhangs, and towering shelters that seem almost too deliberate to be entirely natural. At sunrise, long shadows stretch across the plateau, while drifting mist softens the edges of the ancient stone, creating an atmosphere where geology and imagination become difficult to separate. Long before written history reached this region, people found meaning within these remarkable formations. Archaeological evidence shows that the plateau was occupied for thousands of years, with traces of human activity dating back to prehistoric times. Rock shelters preserve ancient paintings created with red pigments, depicting human figures, animals, geometric patterns, and symbols whose meanings remain uncertain. Though weather has faded many of these images, enough survives to reveal that generations returned repeatedly to this landscape, leaving behind fragments of belief without the words to explain them. The paintings themselves continue to provoke careful study. Some appear to illustrate hunting scenes or ceremonial gatherings. Others consist of abstract motifs that resist easy interpretation. Were they records of important events, territorial markers, spiritual expressions, or visual stories understood only within the communities that created them? Archaeologists generally avoid assigning definitive meanings, recognizing that symbols can lose their original context even when the images themselves endure. As centuries passed, the plateau acquired new layers of cultural significance. During the Dvaravati period and later Buddhist traditions, several natural rock shelters were adapted into sacred spaces. Stone pillars, carved boundaries, shrines, and images of the Buddha appeared among formations that had already stood for millions of years. Rather than replacing the older landscape, these additions seem to have embraced it, allowing natural geology and human devotion to exist side by side. The result is a place where multiple eras overlap without completely erasing one another. Perhaps the most striking feature of Phrabat is the extraordinary relationship between natural erosion and human adaptation. Certain rock formations resemble gateways, towers, or carefully balanced monuments despite having been shaped primarily by wind, rain, and geological processes. Ancient builders incorporated these existing formations into religious architecture with remarkable restraint, altering surprisingly little. It is often difficult to determine where nature ends and deliberate construction begins. Local traditions add another dimension to the landscape. Many formations carry names connected to regional folklore, particularly the legend of Nang Usa, a princess whose story has been woven into the identity of the plateau for generations. According to these traditions, unusual rocks became linked with episodes from her life, transforming geological landmarks into chapters of a living narrative. While historians distinguish folklore from archaeological evidence, the persistence of these stories illustrates how landscapes often preserve memory through oral tradition long after written records disappear. Even within established scholarship, important questions remain. Why did prehistoric communities repeatedly choose this plateau when other shelters existed nearby? Did the unusual stone formations possess spiritual significance before religious monuments appeared? Were particular alignments selected because of practical considerations such as protection and visibility, or because they reflected cosmological beliefs now impossible to reconstruct? The available evidence offers intriguing possibilities but few absolute answers. Beyond mainstream interpretation, Phrabat has inspired more speculative ideas. Some observers suggest that certain balancing rocks appear so precisely positioned that they wonder whether ancient people intentionally modified naturally formed structures to enhance their symbolic appearance. Others have proposed that specific formations may align with seasonal sunrise or sunset positions, hinting at astronomical observations embedded within the landscape. A handful of fringe theories even imagine that hidden chambers or undiscovered carvings remain concealed beneath collapsed sandstone or dense vegetation. None of these proposals has been confirmed, yet ongoing archaeological surveys continue to reveal previously undocumented features, reminding researchers that the plateau still has stories left to tell. As daylight filters through towering stone pillars and quiet forest paths, the silence feels remarkably complete. Every weathered painting, every balanced rock, and every carefully placed shrine reflects generations separated by centuries, yet connected through the same remarkable landscape. Phrabat does not simply preserve ancient monuments. It preserves an enduring dialogue between nature and humanity, one that continues to resist simple explanation. Whether its greatest mysteries lie within its fading rock art, its sacred traditions, or beneath stones that have yet to be examined, the plateau quietly suggests that its oldest secrets may still remain hidden in plain sight. From towering sandstone formations shaped by nature, our journey now descends into a world sculpted almost entirely by human hands. If Phrabat reveals how landscapes can become sacred through time, the next destination explores how memory itself can be carved into stone, preserved beneath the earth where generations sought not shelter, but eternity. Rolling hills covered with oak and pine surround the ancient site of Beit, located in present-day Palestine. At first glance, the landscape appears peaceful and unassuming. Gentle slopes stretch beneath the Mediterranean sky, offering little hint of what lies hidden below. Yet, beneath these quiet hills extends one of the most remarkable underground burial complexes of the ancient world, a vast necropolis where corridors disappear into darkness, opening onto chambers lined with hundreds of stone sarcophagi, elaborate carvings, and inscriptions left by people who journeyed from distant lands to rest here forever. The origins of Beit She'arim reach back many centuries, but the necropolis achieved its greatest importance during the 2nd through 4th centuries A.D. Following the death of Rabbi Judah Hanasi, one of the most influential Jewish scholars of the period, tradition holds that he was buried at this location. His burial transformed Beit She'arim into a highly respected destination, attracting families from across the Mediterranean who wished to place their loved ones near a site of profound religious significance. Excavations have revealed an extraordinary network of catacombs carved directly into the soft limestone. Some passages remain modest and functional, while others expand into impressive halls supported by carefully shaped pillars. Massive stone sarcophagi occupy many chambers, their surfaces decorated with intricate reliefs featuring lions, eagles, wreaths, geometric designs, mythological figures, and symbolic motifs drawn from multiple artistic traditions. These carvings quietly reflect a world where cultural influences moved freely across regions, blending local customs with ideas carried through trade and migration. The inscriptions are equally remarkable. Written in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and several other languages, they preserve names, prayers, titles, and personal messages left by families whose lives unfolded hundreds or even thousands of kilometers apart. Together, they reveal that Beit She'arim served not merely as a local cemetery but as an international place of burial, connecting communities scattered throughout the ancient world. The necropolis became a destination where geography mattered less than shared identity and enduring memory. Yet, despite decades of archaeological research, many aspects of the site remain uncertain. Not every chamber has been fully explored, and numerous passages were sealed by collapse long before modern excavations began. Some catacombs display highly elaborate architectural planning, while neighboring sections appear comparatively simple. Did different generations expand the necropolis according to changing traditions? Were particular chambers reserved for prominent families or religious scholars? The available evidence offers possibilities rather than definitive conclusions. Walking through these underground corridors produces an unusual sense of stillness. Light reaches only a short distance before fading into shadow, leaving carved faces and inscriptions to emerge gradually from the darkness. Every doorway leads toward another chamber, another collection of names, another reminder that countless individual lives once converged in this hidden landscape. Even silence seems to possess unusual weight here, shaped by centuries of uninterrupted rest. Several carvings continue to inspire discussion among researchers. Alongside unmistakable religious symbols appear decorative motifs influenced by classical Greek and Roman art. Rather than suggesting contradiction, these artistic combinations reveal the cultural complexity of the era. Ancient communities often absorbed ideas from neighboring societies while preserving their own traditions. Even so, the symbolic meanings behind certain reliefs remain difficult to reconstruct. Without accompanying written explanations, many interpretations remain thoughtful possibilities rather than established facts. Beyond conventional archaeology, Beit has naturally attracted more speculative attention. Some visitors have suggested that unexplored tunnels still extend beyond the mapped catacombs, concealed behind collapsed walls or untouched sediment. Others have wondered whether hidden repositories containing manuscripts or ritual objects were intentionally sealed during periods of instability. A few fringe theories propose that subtle architectural alignments carried symbolic meanings related to celestial events or sacred geometry. None of these proposals has been substantiated through archaeological evidence, yet they continue to capture the imagination because the necropolis itself feels incomplete, as though portions of its story remain hidden just beyond the reach of excavation. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not within any single chamber, but within the remarkable decision made by so many distant families to bring their dead here. What invisible bond drew travelers across mountains and seas to this hillside? What hopes accompanied those final journeys? The carved inscriptions preserve names but rarely explain emotions, leaving modern visitors to contemplate motivations that time has quietly erased. As footsteps echo softly through passages untouched by sunlight for centuries, Beit Shearim becomes more than a burial ground. It becomes an archive of memory written in stone, where every unopened chamber and every weathered inscription hints that the deepest stories may still rest patiently beneath the hills, waiting for another doorway to emerge from the darkness. If underground tombs preserve the echoes of memory, ancient cities preserve the echoes of conversation. Leaving the silent corridors of Beit Shearim behind, our path now leads toward the heart of Anatolia, where countless voices once filled crowded streets, negotiated distant trade, and pressed their thoughts into clay, creating a record that still speaks nearly 4,000 years later. At first light, the broad plain surrounding Kültepe appears calm and almost timeless. Rising gently above the surrounding farmland in central Turkey, the great mound seems unremarkable from a distance, little more than a low hill shaped by nature. Yet every layer of earth conceals another chapter of human occupation. Beneath the surface lies one of the oldest and most influential commercial centers of the ancient Near East, a settlement whose buried archives transformed our understanding of early civilization. Known in antiquity as Kanesh, Kültepe flourished during the early 2nd millennium BC. It became the center of an extensive trading network linking Anatolia with the powerful cities of Mesopotamia. Merchants traveled hundreds of miles with caravans carrying tin, textiles, precious metals, and luxury goods, navigating mountain passes and open plains to reach bustling marketplaces. Far from existing as an isolated settlement, Kanish formed part of an interconnected world where commerce, diplomacy, and cultural exchange crossed remarkable distances. The city itself consisted of two closely connected parts. A fortified upper mound housed local rulers and administrative buildings, while below stretched the Kerem, a merchant quarter occupied largely by Assyrian traders. Here, homes doubled as businesses, warehouses, and offices. Contracts were negotiated, partnerships formed, debts recorded, and disputes carefully documented. Daily life unfolded through conversations that, unlike spoken words, left an enduring physical record. That record survives in astonishing abundance. Excavations at Kültepe have uncovered more than 23,000 clay tablets, making it one of the richest collections of written material from the ancient world. These cuneiform texts reveal an unexpectedly personal glimpse into everyday life. Alongside commercial agreements appear family letters, marriage arrangements, inheritance disputes, travel reports, financial accounts, and messages exchanged between husbands, wives, parents, and children. Rather than focusing solely on kings and battles, the tablets illuminate ordinary people managing businesses, solving problems, and maintaining relationships across vast distances. The preservation of these documents owes much to disaster. Fires that destroyed buildings inadvertently baked the clay tablets, hardening them permanently. What began as catastrophe ultimately became an extraordinary gift to archaeology. Thousands of conversations survived because flames transformed fragile clay into lasting archives. Yet, despite this remarkable collection, many mysteries remain. Only a portion of the settlement has been excavated, and countless areas remain buried beneath centuries of accumulated earth. Entire neighborhoods may still contain archives waiting to be discovered. Each excavation season adds new fragments to an already immense puzzle, occasionally revealing names or events previously unknown from any historical source. The tablets themselves also raise intriguing questions. They describe sophisticated financial systems, international partnerships, legal procedures, and commercial organizations operating with remarkable efficiency. Such complexity challenges older assumptions about the development of long-distance trade. How did merchants coordinate transactions across hundreds of miles without modern communication? How were trust and reputation maintained between individuals separated by months of travel? The surviving texts provide valuable answers, yet many practical details remain elusive. Walking across the mound today, it is difficult to imagine the vibrant city that once stood here. Beneath every step lie collapsed houses, forgotten workshops, abandoned streets, and unopened rooms that have remained undisturbed for nearly 4,000 years. Archaeologists often describe excavation as reading a book one page at a time. At Kültepe, however, most of the pages remain sealed beneath the ground. Beyond mainstream scholarship, the site has naturally inspired more speculative interpretations. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have suggested that undiscovered archives may still preserve historical events capable of reshaping our understanding of the ancient Near East. Others wonder whether deeper levels of the mound conceal even earlier settlements whose records predate the known tablets by centuries. A few fringe theories go further, proposing that references within damaged texts hint at forgotten kingdoms, unexplained technologies, or contacts with civilizations yet to be identified. These ideas remain unverified, and no archaeological evidence presently supports such conclusions. Nevertheless, they endure because every newly uncovered tablet reminds us how much knowledge can remain hidden beneath a single hill. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Kültepe is not what has already been translated, but what has yet to emerge. Thousands of voices have already crossed the gulf of time, speaking through baked clay with surprising clarity. Yet countless others remain silent, still buried where ancient scribes left them. Somewhere beneath the mound, unopened rooms may continue protecting messages that have waited nearly 4 millennia for someone to read the first line, raising the quiet possibility that history still has conversations left to reveal. If Kültepe preserved the voices of merchants pressed into clay, the next destination preserves something quieter still. Here, the written record fades, and stone takes its place. Walls, gateways, and buried foundations become the language through which an ancient city continues to speak, leaving archaeology to translate what history never recorded. On a broad plain in southeastern Turkey, Tilmen Höyük rises gently above the surrounding fields, its grassy slopes concealing thousands of years of uninterrupted human occupation. At first glance, the mound seems almost ordinary, blending naturally into the landscape. Yet, beneath its surface, rests the accumulated remains of one of the region's most significant Bronze Age cities, where successive generations built, destroyed, and rebuilt their homes until an entire urban landscape became layered beneath a single hill. The settlement's history reaches deep into the early Bronze Age, with its greatest prosperity occurring during the 3rd and early 2nd millennia BC. Positioned near important trade corridors linking Anatolia, northern Mesopotamia, and the eastern Mediterranean, Tilmen Höyük occupied a strategic location where commerce, diplomacy, and political influence intersected. It stood at the crossroads of powerful kingdoms whose ambitions frequently reshaped the region. Excavations have revealed an impressive fortified city. Massive stone foundations supported towering mud-brick walls that once enclosed palaces, administrative buildings, workshops, and residential districts. Monumental gateways controlled access to the settlement, while carefully planned streets connected different quarters of the city. The sophistication of its defensive architecture reflects a community accustomed to both prosperity and uncertainty, where security remained as essential as trade itself. One of the most striking discoveries is the city's palace complex. Built upon elevated ground overlooking much of the settlement, its broad courtyards and carefully organized rooms suggest an administrative center that coordinated political authority across the surrounding countryside. Storerooms indicate the collection and redistribution of agricultural goods, while imported objects reveal connections extending far beyond the city's immediate borders. Tilmen Höyük was not an isolated settlement, but part of a dynamic network that linked distant cultures through commerce and diplomacy. Yet, despite its importance, the identity of those who governed the city remains surprisingly elusive. Archaeologists have reconstructed impressive buildings, uncovered valuable artifacts, and traced periods of expansion and destruction, but written records directly identifying its rulers remain scarce. Was Tilmen Höyük the capital of a regional kingdom known by another ancient name? Did it answer to larger empires, or did it maintain long periods of independence? These questions continue to inspire careful debate among historians. The layers of destruction found throughout the mound add another dimension to the story. Several phases reveal evidence of violent fires that ended entire chapters of occupation. Burned walls, collapsed roofs, and shattered pottery preserve moments when ordinary life stopped abruptly. Warfare remains one possibility, but conflict was not the only force capable of reshaping ancient cities. Earthquakes, internal political struggles, shifting alliances, economic decline, or changing trade routes may also have contributed. In many cases, archaeology preserves the outcome more clearly than the cause. Walking across the excavated ruins today, it is impossible not to notice the remarkable continuity of the site. Each generation built upon the remains of those before it, sometimes preserving earlier foundations, sometimes leveling them completely. The city became a physical record of memory itself, with every new construction quietly burying another chapter beneath its streets. Modern archaeologists continue that process in reverse, carefully removing one layer at a time to reveal stories separated by centuries. Several architectural features continue to attract scholarly attention. The scale of certain fortifications appears unusually ambitious for a regional center, prompting questions about the political influence Tilmen Höyük once exercised. Imported ceramics and luxury goods also suggest relationships extending across considerable distances. How extensive were these connections? Were merchants, diplomats, and artisans moving through the city more frequently than the surviving evidence can demonstrate? Each excavation season offers additional clues while introducing new uncertainties. Beyond mainstream interpretation, Tilmen Höyük has naturally inspired more speculative ideas. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have suggested that unexplored sectors of the mound may conceal royal archives comparable to those discovered at other Bronze Age capitals. Others wonder whether sealed chambers beneath the palace still protect ceremonial objects, administrative records, or treasures hidden during periods of invasion. A few fringe theories propose that the city's repeated rebuilding followed astronomical or symbolic patterns rather than purely practical considerations. None of these proposals has been confirmed, yet the immense depth of the archaeological layers reminds us that much of the ancient city still lies untouched beneath the earth. As evening light settles across the weathered stones, Tilmen Höyük begins to resemble less a ruin than a conversation interrupted thousands of years ago. Every buried foundation hints at another forgotten generation. Every collapsed gateway suggests another untold event, and every unexplored layer quietly invites further discovery. The mound has already surrendered remarkable evidence of an ancient world, yet its greatest secrets may still rest deeper below, patiently waiting for the moment when history uncovers another forgotten page. If layered cities preserve the rise and fall of kingdoms, the next destination expands the mystery across an entire landscape. Leaving the fortified streets of Tilmen Höyük behind, we now travel to a place where the ruins do not emerge from fertile valleys, but from a vast stone plateau shaped by wind, silence, and a climate that has transformed beyond recognition. Far into the interior of present-day Mauritania, the cliffs and plateaus of Tichitt stretch across an immense horizon, where earth and sky seem to meet without interruption. Today, the landscape appears harsh and almost timeless. Sparse vegetation clings to rocky ground, while long seasons of heat and dry winds dominate the region. At first glance, it seems an unlikely setting for one of West Africa's earliest known complex societies. Yet, scattered across this remote plateau are the remains of hundreds of carefully constructed stone settlements, quietly preserving the memory of a world that once looked remarkably different. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Tichitt tradition emerged around 1900 BC and flourished for many centuries. During that period, the climate was significantly wetter than it is today. Seasonal rainfall supported grasslands, freshwater resources, and fertile environments capable of sustaining farming, livestock herding, and permanent communities. Instead of endless arid plains, the inhabitants experienced a landscape that encouraged settlement, cultivation, and social organization on a remarkable scale. The stone architecture immediately distinguishes Tichitt from many other prehistoric sites. Dry stone walls outline houses, courtyards, storage areas, and defensive enclosures with surprising precision. Entire villages were carefully planned, often occupying elevated positions that overlooked surrounding terrain. Some settlements appear modest, while others expanded into substantial communities connected by shared architectural traditions. Their builders demonstrated an impressive understanding of construction techniques using locally available materials, creating durable structures that have survived thousands of years despite an increasingly unforgiving environment. Excavations have revealed evidence of millet cultivation, animal husbandry, stone tools, pottery, and organized food storage. Together, these discoveries indicate a society capable of supporting relatively dense populations through coordinated agricultural practices. Many researchers regard the Tichitt tradition as one of the earliest examples of complex social development in West Africa, challenging outdated assumptions that sophisticated urban organization emerged only in a handful of ancient regions. Yet, the full nature of this civilization remains difficult to reconstruct. Unlike societies that left extensive written records, the people of Tichitt communicated through traditions that have largely disappeared. Their political structures, religious beliefs, languages, and systems of leadership remain largely unknown. Archaeologists must rely on architecture, artifacts, and settlement patterns to piece together a history whose most important chapters were never written down. One of the enduring questions concerns the remarkable consistency of the settlements themselves. Across wide areas, villages share similar layouts and construction methods despite considerable distances between them. Does this reflect a unified cultural tradition maintained through regular contact? Or did independent communities simply adopt successful building techniques suited to their environment? The archaeological evidence allows multiple interpretations, each revealing a different vision of how these ancient societies interacted. The eventual decline of the Tichitt tradition is generally linked to long-term climatic change. As rainfall decreased over centuries, grasslands gradually gave way to expanding desert conditions. Water sources became less reliable. Agricultural productivity declined, and communities adapted by migrating toward more favorable regions. The transformation unfolded gradually rather than suddenly, illustrating how environmental change can reshape civilizations without dramatic conquest or catastrophic collapse. Still, important uncertainties remain. Many settlements have never been fully excavated, while others remain hidden beneath accumulated sediment or isolated across difficult terrain. Every newly documented site expands the known extent of this remarkable cultural landscape, suggesting that its true scale may be even greater than currently understood. Beyond mainstream archaeology, Tichitt has inspired thoughtful speculation. Some researchers outside conventional interpretations have wondered whether the plateau once supported population levels significantly larger than present evidence suggests. Others have proposed that undiscovered ceremonial centers or administrative settlements remain concealed among unexplored ridges and valleys. A few fringe theories even imagine that Tichitt formed part of a much broader network of prehistoric societies extending across regions now separated by desert, connected during periods when the Sahara supported greener environments. While environmental studies confirm that the ancient Sahara experienced dramatically different climates, broader claims about extensive forgotten civilizations remain unverified. Standing among the weathered stone walls today, it is difficult to reconcile the quiet landscape with the thriving communities that once filled these settlements with voices, harvests, and daily routines. Every collapsed foundation suggests lives carefully adapted to a world that no longer exists. The wind moves freely through abandoned enclosures where families once gathered, reminding us that landscapes can change so profoundly that they erase nearly every visible trace of the people who once called them home. Perhaps that is the deepest mystery of Tichitt. Its ruins do not merely preserve an ancient civilization, they preserve the memory of an entirely different environment, one almost unimaginable from the landscape visible today. And if so much has already been altered by time, climate, and silence, how many more settlements still rest beyond the horizon, waiting beneath stone and sand for the next chapter of their story to emerge? If Tichitt reminds us that entire civilizations can be reshaped by changing climates, the next destination reveals how power itself can become buried beneath the shifting landscape. Our journey now returns to the ancient kingdom of Khwarezm, where towering walls still rise from an immense desert plain, preserving the remains of a royal city that once stood at the center of an influential empire. In the remote reaches of present-day Uzbekistan, the massive ruins of Toprak Kala emerge from the surrounding earth with remarkable authority. Even after nearly 2,000 years of erosion, the fortress dominates the horizon. High mud-brick walls enclose an enormous rectangular complex, their weathered surfaces glowing deep shades of red and gold beneath the afternoon sun. From above, the city appears almost geometric, its carefully planned streets and monumental buildings hinting at an extraordinary level of organization hidden within what now seems like an empty landscape. Toprak Kala was established during the early centuries A.D. and is widely regarded as one of the principal royal centers of the Khwarezmian kingdom. Positioned within a fertile oasis sustained by an extensive irrigation network, the city flourished at a crossroads where agriculture, commerce, and political authority converged. Far from being an isolated desert fortress, it formed part of a sophisticated civilization that transformed the arid plains through remarkable engineering and careful management of water. Excavations have revealed an urban plan of surprising complexity. Broad avenues once connected administrative quarters, residential districts, workshops, and ceremonial spaces. At the heart of the city stood an immense palace complex whose elevated position overlooked much of the surrounding settlement. Monumental halls, reception rooms, storage facilities, and private chambers suggest that Toprak Kala served not only as a fortified residence, but also as an important center of government. Among the site's most remarkable discoveries are fragments of wall paintings, sculpted clay figures, carved wooden elements, and richly decorated architectural details. These surviving works reveal an artistic tradition of exceptional quality. Several rooms contained life-sized statues representing rulers, nobles, and perhaps divine figures, arranged within carefully designed ceremonial settings. Although many sculptures were damaged over time, their remaining forms continue to convey a striking sense of dignity and authority. One chamber has drawn particular attention from archaeologists because of its distinctive arrangement of statues and decorative elements. Often referred to as the Hall of Kings, it appears to have celebrated dynastic power through a carefully organized display of royal imagery. Yet many questions remain. Were these figures portraits of individual rulers, symbolic representations of authority, or participants in elaborate state rituals? Without accompanying written explanations, certainty remains just beyond reach. The city also preserves evidence of remarkable administrative sophistication. Archaeologists uncovered wooden writing tablets, seals, accounting records, and other objects associated with governance and economic management. Together, these discoveries suggest that Toprak Kala functioned as more than a ceremonial capital. It was a place where officials supervised resources, organized taxation, coordinated irrigation, and maintained the complex systems necessary to support a flourishing kingdom. Despite these achievements, the city's eventual decline remains only partially understood. Changing political conditions, shifting trade routes, environmental pressures, and regional conflict have all been proposed as contributing factors. Like many ancient centers, Toprak Kala appears to have experienced gradual transformation rather than a single dramatic collapse. As irrigation systems deteriorated and surrounding landscapes evolved, the city slowly lost the foundations upon which its prosperity depended. Walking through the ruins today reveals an unusual combination of grandeur and emptiness. Monumental walls still define streets where countless people once lived and worked, while collapsed palace rooms preserve only fragments of their former splendor. The silence is almost architectural in itself, filling spaces once occupied by rulers, officials, artisans, and visitors arriving from distant regions. Even after decades of excavation, substantial portions of the site remain unexplored. Beneath collapsed structures may still lie additional archives, sculptures, workshops, or ceremonial chambers waiting to emerge through future research. Every excavation season has expanded understanding of the city while simultaneously revealing new questions that earlier discoveries could not answer. Beyond mainstream archaeology, Toprak Kala has naturally inspired more speculative interpretations. Some researchers outside conventional scholarship have suggested that undiscovered palace vaults may still contain royal archives capable of illuminating obscure chapters of Khwarezmian history. Others have wondered whether hidden subterranean passages once connected key buildings within the royal complex, serving practical or ceremonial purposes. A few fringe theories even propose that the city's unusually formal architectural layout reflects symbolic cosmological principles rather than purely administrative planning. None of these ideas has been verified through archaeological evidence, yet they persist because the remarkable scale of the ruins continues to hint at complexities not yet fully understood. As evening shadows lengthen across the weathered walls, Toprak Kala becomes something more than an abandoned capital. It stands as a reminder that even powerful kingdoms leave incomplete stories behind. Every broken statue, every unopened room, and every buried foundation suggests that the royal city has not surrendered all of its memories. Somewhere beneath layers of dust and time, another discovery may still be waiting to reveal how much of this forgotten kingdom remains hidden from history's view. If royal capitals preserve the ambitions of kings, the next destination preserves something more elusive. Here, the clues are scattered across fields, riverbanks, and buried layers of earth, where fragments of daily life have survived far more completely than the names of the people who once built the city. It is a place whose influence seems undeniable, yet whose history remains curiously incomplete. In the fertile floodplains of present-day West Bengal, India, the ancient site of Chandraketugarh rests quietly beneath cultivated farmland and small villages. The landscape feels gentle and unhurried. Rivers wind through the lowlands, nourishing fields just as they have for thousands of years. Nothing immediately suggests that this peaceful countryside once supported one of eastern India's most sophisticated urban centers. Yet, beneath the soil lies a settlement whose artifacts have fascinated archaeologists for more than a century, revealing a civilization of remarkable craftsmanship, extensive trade, and enduring mystery. Archaeological evidence indicates that Chandraketugarh flourished for many centuries, with occupation beginning at least by the early 1st millennium BC and continuing well into the early historical period. Its position near ancient waterways placed it within an important network of inland and maritime trade. Merchants could move goods through interconnected rivers toward the Bay of Bengal, linking the settlement with distant regions across South Asia and beyond. Rather than existing on the edge of the ancient world, Chandraketugarh occupied a strategic crossroads where cultures, technologies, and artistic traditions naturally converged. Excavations and surface discoveries have produced an extraordinary collection of artifacts. Delicately molded terracotta plaques portray musicians, dancers, deities, noble figures, animals, mythical creatures, and scenes of everyday life with remarkable detail. Finely crafted pottery, beads, seals, coins, ornaments, and sculptural fragments further demonstrate the city's artistic sophistication. Many objects display an elegance that continues to surprise modern observers, suggesting workshops staffed by highly skilled artisans whose techniques evolved over generations. Among the most intriguing discoveries are the terracotta plaques themselves. Their expressive faces, elaborate hairstyles, intricate jewelry, and carefully rendered clothing preserve fleeting moments from a society whose written history remains surprisingly limited. Some plaques clearly depict religious themes, while others appear entirely secular, offering glimpses into festivals, performances, family life, and social customs. Together, they form a visual archive, unlike almost any other in the region. Yet, despite this abundance of material culture, Chandraketugarh remains unusually difficult to identify within surviving historical texts. Unlike many ancient cities whose names appear repeatedly in royal inscriptions or literary works, this settlement seems to exist primarily through archaeology rather than written records. Was it known by another name now lost to history? Did political changes gradually erase its identity while preserving its physical remains? These questions continue to inspire careful scholarly debate. The city's economic importance is easier to appreciate. Imported objects and stylistic influences suggest connections extending across the Indian Ocean and into broader commercial networks. Seals, coins, and trade goods indicate sustained interaction with distant communities. Such discoveries reveal a society fully engaged with regional exchange, where merchants, craftsmen, and travelers contributed to a thriving urban environment shaped by both local tradition and international contact. Still, much of Chandraketugarh remains hidden beneath modern settlements and agricultural land. Large-scale excavation has been limited, leaving substantial portions of the ancient city unexplored. Every artifact recovered from the soil hints at structures, workshops, temples, marketplaces, and residential quarters that have yet to be systematically uncovered. Archaeologists often describe the site as a vast puzzle assembled from scattered pieces, where the overall picture remains frustratingly incomplete. Several inscriptions discovered at the site continue to attract attention. Written in early scripts that are sometimes fragmentary or difficult to interpret, they offer valuable clues without providing a complete historical narrative. Combined with the artistic richness of the artifacts, these inscriptions suggest a literate and organized society whose administrative and cultural achievements likely extended far beyond what survives today. Beyond conventional archaeology, Chandraketugarh has naturally inspired more speculative interpretations. Some researchers outside mainstream scholarship have proposed that undiscovered sections of the city may conceal monumental public buildings comparable to those found at better-known urban centers. Others wonder whether ancient river channels, now altered or buried, once supported a much larger port than current evidence demonstrates. A handful of fringe theories even suggest that unusual motifs appearing on certain terracotta plaques preserve symbolic knowledge inherited from much older traditions whose origins have yet to be identified. None of these ideas has been confirmed, yet the incomplete nature of the archaeological record leaves room for continued investigation. As twilight settles over the quiet fields, it becomes difficult to imagine the bustling city that once occupied this landscape. The voices of merchants have faded, workshops have disappeared beneath layers of earth, and river routes have shifted with the passing centuries. Yet, fragments of beauty continue to emerge from the soil, each one offering another glimpse into a civilization whose identity remains only partially understood. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Chandraketugarh is not what has already been discovered, but how much of its story still lies concealed beneath the fields, waiting for history to uncover another forgotten chapter. If Chandraketugarh reminds us that an entire city can survive through scattered fragments, the next destination reveals what happens when an ancient settlement begins to emerge almost layer by layer, rewriting long-held assumptions with every new excavation. Here, the mystery is not hidden inside towering monuments or elaborate tombs, but within the quiet remains of an ordinary community whose sophistication was concealed beneath the soil for more than 2,000 years. On the gentle banks of the Vaigai River in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu, the landscape around Keeladi appears peaceful and familiar. Green fields stretch toward the horizon, broken only by clusters of trees and small villages that continue traditions of agriculture practiced for generations. Few visitors would suspect that beneath this fertile ground rests the remains of an ancient urban settlement, whose discoveries have become some of the most significant archaeological findings in South Asia during recent decades. The first systematic excavations revealed something unexpected. Instead of isolated structures or scattered artifacts, archaeologists uncovered the foundations of a carefully organized settlement. Brick buildings, streets, drainage channels, wells lined with fired clay rings, industrial workspaces and domestic areas began to emerge from the earth with remarkable clarity. The discovery suggested a thriving urban community rather than a simple rural village, raising important questions about the development of early civilization in southern India. Radiocarbon dating indicates that portions of the settlement date back to at least the 6th century BC, while continued occupation likely extended through later centuries. These findings have prompted renewed discussion among historians regarding the chronology of urbanization in the region. Rather than existing on the margins of ancient history, Keeladi appears to represent a sophisticated center where literacy, craftsmanship, commerce, and organized civic planning flourished much earlier than many scholars once assumed. Among the most compelling discoveries are hundreds of inscribed pottery fragments bearing characters written in the Tamil Brahmi script. Although many inscriptions consist of only a few letters or names, they provide valuable evidence that writing had become integrated into aspects of daily life. Unlike monumental inscriptions celebrating rulers or military victories, these modest markings hint at ordinary people labeling possessions, recording ownership, or participating in everyday economic activity. They offer a rare glimpse into literacy beyond the royal court. The settlement also reveals extraordinary evidence of specialized craftsmanship. Excavations have uncovered beads fashioned from semi-precious stones, iron tools, spindle whorls used in textile production, ivory objects, shell ornaments, and traces of furnaces associated with metalworking. Each discovery reflects skilled artisans working within an organized community supported by trade and technological knowledge. Far from being isolated, Keeladi appears connected to broader commercial networks extending across the Indian subcontinent and beyond. Perhaps equally impressive is the city's infrastructure. Carefully constructed drainage systems carried wastewater away from residential areas, while brick-lined channels and wells demonstrate sophisticated approaches to water management. Such planning reflects an understanding of urban organization often associated with much larger or more extensively documented civilizations. The settlement seems to have balanced practical engineering with the demands of everyday life in ways that continue to impress modern researchers. Yet, many important questions remain unanswered. Only a relatively small portion of the site has been excavated. The full size of the ancient settlement, its political organization, and its relationship with neighboring communities are still subjects of active investigation. Was Keeladi an independent urban center, part of a wider network of settlements along the Vaigai River, or one component of a much larger regional system that has yet to be fully uncovered? Each excavation season expands the available evidence while introducing new mysteries. The absence of monumental palaces or massive temples also invites reflection. Keeladi's significance lies not in spectacular architecture but in the remarkable quality of its everyday remains. Streets, workshops, homes, pottery, tools, and inscriptions combine to reveal a society whose achievements were woven into ordinary life rather than concentrated within monumental displays of power. In many ways, this quiet sophistication makes the discoveries even more compelling. Beyond mainstream archaeology, Keeladi has naturally inspired broader speculation. Some researchers outside conventional scholarship have proposed that undiscovered sectors of the settlement may extend far beyond the current excavation boundaries, forming part of an urban landscape much larger than presently documented. Others wonder whether additional inscriptions still buried beneath the soil could illuminate unknown chapters of early Tamil literature or administration. A few fringe theories suggest that Keeladi represents the surviving fragment of an advanced civilization, whose influence spread across distant regions before fading from historical memory. These ideas remain unverified, and current archaeological evidence supports more measured interpretations. Nevertheless, every excavation continues to reveal surprises that remind us how incomplete our understanding of the ancient world remains. As the evening sun casts long shadows across freshly exposed brick walls, Keeladi feels less like a forgotten ruin than a conversation interrupted in the middle of a sentence. Every newly uncovered artifact adds another word to a story that has been waiting beneath the earth for centuries. And with so much of the settlement still untouched, one cannot help but wonder how many more chapters remain hidden below the fields, waiting patiently for the next careful brushstroke of archaeology to bring them back into the light. If Keeladi reminds us that extraordinary civilizations can emerge from the quiet traces of everyday life, the next destination takes that idea even further. Here, the story does not belong to a single era or one remarkable culture. Instead, it unfolds across nearly 9,000 years, where every generation built upon the lives of those who came before, transforming one modest hill into an archive of human history itself. Near the Mediterranean coast of southern Turkey, the ancient mound of Yumuktepe rises gently above the modern city of Mersin. To passing travelers, it appears little different from countless natural hills scattered across the landscape. Grass covers its slopes, while trees and nearby neighborhoods soften its outline. Yet, beneath this seemingly ordinary mound lies one of the longest continuously occupied archaeological sites in the eastern Mediterranean, preserving an almost uninterrupted sequence of human settlement stretching from the Neolithic period into the Middle Ages. Few places offer such a remarkable timeline. Archaeologists have identified more than 30 major occupational layers, each representing a different chapter in the site's long history. Every generation reshaped the settlement, constructing new homes, rebuilding walls, expanding public spaces, and adapting to changing political and environmental conditions. Over thousands of years, these countless acts of rebuilding gradually elevated the mound itself, turning accumulated human activity into the landscape visible today. The earliest inhabitants arrived around 7000 BC, when farming communities began establishing permanent villages across the region. Excavations have uncovered stone tools, pottery, hearths, storage facilities, and simple dwellings that reveal the transition from mobile lifestyles to settled agriculture. These discoveries illustrate a society learning to cultivate crops, domesticate animals, and organize communal life in ways that would permanently reshape human civilization. As centuries passed, Yumuktepe continued to evolve. During the Chalcolithic period, the settlement displayed increasing social complexity, reflected in larger buildings, specialized craft production, and expanding trade networks. Copper objects began appearing alongside traditional stone tools, marking the gradual introduction of metallurgy into daily life. Rather than replacing older technologies immediately, new innovations blended with established traditions, creating a society constantly adapting without abandoning its past. One of the most remarkable discoveries belongs to the late Neolithic and early Chalcolithic periods, a substantial defensive system that included thick stone walls and carefully planned fortifications. Such sophisticated construction challenges earlier assumptions that peaceful farming communities rarely invested in large-scale defenses. What circumstances encouraged these people to build such formidable barriers? Were they protecting valuable resources, responding to regional conflict, or expressing emerging political authority? The archaeological evidence offers possibilities without complete certainty. The site's strategic location undoubtedly contributed to its long survival. Positioned near fertile plains, freshwater sources, and Mediterranean trade routes, Yumuktepe occupied an ideal setting where agriculture, commerce, and cultural exchange naturally intersected. Throughout successive eras, different civilizations recognized the advantages of the location, leaving behind traces of Hittite influence, Assyrian contacts, Hellenistic occupation, Roman administration, Byzantine settlement, and later medieval communities. Few archaeological sites preserve such a continuous record of cultural transformation within a single location. Walking across the excavated sections today is like descending through time itself. Each layer reveals a different world separated not by distance, but by depth. Beneath Roman foundations lie Bronze Age buildings. Beneath those rest Chalcolithic structures, followed by Neolithic villages buried even deeper. The Earth becomes a vertical timeline where thousands of years exist within only a few meters of carefully excavated soil. Despite extensive research, much of Yumuktepe remains unexplored. Only portions of the mound have been systematically excavated, leaving significant areas untouched for future generations of archaeologists. Every newly exposed layer has the potential to revise existing interpretations, demonstrating that even after decades of study, the site continues to surprise researchers with unexpected discoveries. Several questions remain particularly intriguing. Why did this settlement endure while many neighboring communities disappeared? How did its inhabitants repeatedly adapt to changing climates, technologies, migrations, and political upheavals without permanently abandoning the site? Beyond mainstream scholarship, Yumuktepe has inspired more speculative ideas. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have suggested that deeper, unexcavated layers may preserve evidence of settlement even older than currently documented. Others wonder whether hidden ceremonial structures remain buried beneath later construction, protected by millennia of accumulated occupation. A few fringe theories propose that the remarkable continuity of the site reflects forgotten traditions passed almost unbroken across countless generations, preserving knowledge now impossible to recognize in the surviving archaeological record. While such ideas remain unsupported by current evidence, the exceptional depth and complexity of the mound ensure that future excavations may continue reshaping what we know. As twilight settles over the ancient hill, Yumuktepe seems to embody the quiet persistence of human civilization itself. Every buried foundation supports another. Every forgotten home becomes the ground beneath a newer one, and every generation leaves behind traces that future centuries unknowingly inherit. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what has already been uncovered, but how many more lives, innovations, and forgotten stories still rest beneath the mound, waiting patiently to emerge from the layers of time. If Yumuktepe reveals how countless generations can build an entire history beneath a single hill, the next destination carries that idea into even deeper antiquity. Here, every layer reaches farther into humanity's distant past, preserving the gradual emergence of technology, ritual, and organized society across nearly 7,000 years of continuous change. On the edge of the central Iranian plateau, where broad deserts meet the distant Zagros Mountains, two low earthen mounds rise quietly above the surrounding plain. Known collectively as Tepe Sialk, they appear modest against the vast landscape. Wind moves across fields that have supported human life for millennia, while the nearby city of Kashan continues to thrive much as ancient settlements once did. From a distance, there is little indication that these unassuming hills conceal one of the oldest and most influential archaeological sites in Western Asia. Excavations have revealed an astonishing sequence of occupation beginning around the 7th millennium BC. Layer after layer, Tepe Sialk preserves the story of communities gradually transforming from early farming villages into increasingly complex societies. Few sites document such a long and detailed progression of human development. Every archaeological layer captures another moment in an ongoing experiment, one that slowly reshaped the relationship between people, technology, and the environment. The earliest inhabitants constructed simple mud brick homes clustered around open spaces where daily life unfolded. Stone tools, grinding stones, hearths, and handmade pottery illustrate communities learning to cultivate crops and manage domesticated animals while adapting to the changing rhythms of settled existence. These were not isolated pioneers but participants in a wider transformation spreading across parts of the ancient Near East, though each region developed its own distinct traditions. As centuries passed, remarkable changes became visible. Pottery grew increasingly refined, decorated with carefully painted geometric patterns and stylized animal figures. Workshops appeared where skilled craftspeople produced ceramics of exceptional quality. Metallurgy gradually emerged, introducing copper tools alongside traditional stone implements. Every innovation reflected generations of accumulated knowledge rather than sudden invention, revealing a society evolving through patience and experience. One of Tepe Sialk's most fascinating discoveries is its ancient ziggurat-like platform, constructed during the late 4th millennium BC. Although smaller than the monumental temple complexes that would later appear in Mesopotamia, this elevated structure suggests organized labor, careful planning, and shared ceremonial purpose. Archaeologists generally interpret it as an important religious or administrative center, yet its precise function remains uncertain. Was it primarily a place of worship, a symbol of political authority, or perhaps a gathering point where multiple roles overlapped? The surviving remains encourage thoughtful interpretation while resisting absolute conclusions. Burial practices uncovered at the site provide another glimpse into changing beliefs. Graves contain pottery, ornaments, tools, and personal objects placed beside the deceased, hinting at customs that evolved over many centuries. Some burials appear relatively modest, while others display greater investment in grave goods, suggesting emerging social distinctions within the community. Yet, without written records, the meanings behind these choices remain largely beyond our reach. Tepe Sialk also preserves evidence of long-distance exchange. Materials such as obsidian, seashells, and other non-local resources indicate connections extending far beyond the immediate region. These discoveries reveal that even thousands of years before large empires dominated Western Asia, communities were already participating in networks of communication, trade, and cultural interaction that stretched across impressive distances. Despite more than a century of archaeological investigation, substantial mysteries remain. The site's immense chronological depth makes interpretation extraordinarily complex. Every occupational layer overlaps with those above and below it, while later construction often disturbed earlier remains. Researchers continue refining the sequence of development as new analytical techniques reveal details that earlier excavations could not detect. The origins of certain technological innovations discovered at Tepe Sialk also continue to inspire discussion. Did local craftspeople independently develop advanced ceramic and metallurgical techniques, or were these ideas introduced through contact with neighboring cultures? The archaeological evidence suggests both local creativity and regional interaction, yet the precise pathways through which knowledge spread remain difficult to reconstruct. Beyond conventional scholarship, Tepe Sialk has naturally attracted more speculative interpretations. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have proposed that deeper, unexplored layers may preserve evidence of even earlier settlements predating the currently accepted sequence. Others wonder whether the platform concealed ceremonial chambers that remain undiscovered beneath later construction. A few fringe theories suggest that the site's long continuity reflects the preservation of specialized knowledge transmitted across countless generations, leaving subtle traces within its architecture and symbolic traditions. These proposals remain unverified, and archaeological evidence continues to support more cautious interpretations. Nevertheless, the extraordinary depth of the site reminds us that much of its story still lies buried beneath layers that have yet to be carefully examined. As evening shadows settle across the quiet mounds, Tepe Sialk seems almost reluctant to reveal its age. Beneath every exposed wall rests another settlement. Beneath every ancient floor, another forgotten generation. The earth itself has become a vast archive where thousands of years exist one above another, patiently preserving memories that neither wind nor time has completely erased. And somewhere within those remaining layers may still rest the discoveries capable of reshaping how we understand the earliest chapters of civilization itself. If Tepe Sialk reveals how civilization slowly emerged through countless generations of innovation, the next destination introduces a society whose organization seems astonishingly mature from the moment its streets come into view. Here, order is written into the landscape itself, where carefully measured avenues, fortified walls, and silent fire altars continue to challenge our understanding of one of the ancient world's most remarkable cultures. On the edge of the Thar Desert in the Indian state of Rajasthan, the ancient ruins of Kalibangan rise quietly above the dry plain beside the now seasonal Gagar River. The surrounding landscape appears stark yet beautiful, where golden earth stretches toward a distant horizon, broken only by scattered vegetation and shifting dunes. Few signs remain of the river that once sustained this settlement. Yet, thousands of years ago, this region supported a thriving urban community that formed part of the vast Indus Valley civilization. At first glance, Kalibangan resembles many other archaeological mounds, but beneath its surface lies evidence of extraordinary planning. Excavations have revealed a fortified citadel and a carefully organized lower town laid out according to a precise grid. Streets intersect at nearly perfect right angles, residential districts follow deliberate patterns, and drainage systems demonstrate an advanced understanding of sanitation and urban engineering. Every feature reflects thoughtful design rather than gradual, unplanned growth. Kalibangan's earliest occupation dates to the early Harappan period, while the city later expanded into a flourishing mature Harappan settlement around the 3rd millennium BC. Its location along an important river system allowed agriculture, trade, and communication to prosper. Farmers cultivated surrounding fields, artisans produced ceramics and tools, and merchants likely exchanged goods with distant cities scattered across the immense Harappan world. Among the site's most celebrated discoveries is an ancient agricultural field preserved beneath layers of sediment. Archaeologists identified a remarkable pattern of intersecting furrows impressed into the soil, representing one of the earliest known examples of plowed farmland ever discovered. The carefully spaced lines suggest systematic farming techniques designed to cultivate multiple crops simultaneously. Few archaeological discoveries provide such a direct glimpse into everyday agricultural practice thousands of years ago, offering an unusually intimate connection to the rhythms of ancient life. Another feature that continues to attract attention is a series of brick platforms interpreted by many researchers as fire altars. These carefully constructed installations appear in several parts of the settlement and may have served ritual purposes. Their arrangement has prompted considerable discussion. Were they associated with household ceremonies, communal gatherings, or religious traditions unique to this region? Archaeologists continue to examine their context, recognizing that their precise function cannot yet be established with complete confidence. Like many settlements of the Indus Valley civilization, Kalibangan presents a fascinating contradiction. Its architecture demonstrates exceptional planning, standardized construction, and sophisticated civic organization, yet its written symbols remain undeciphered. Seals and pottery bearing the distinctive Indus script have been uncovered throughout the site, preserving messages that modern scholarship still cannot read. Every inscription stands as a reminder that an entire civilization continues speaking in a language whose meaning remains just beyond our grasp. The city's decline remains another enduring mystery. Archaeological evidence suggests that Kalibangan was eventually abandoned, but the precise reasons remain uncertain. Environmental change is often considered the leading explanation. Many researchers believe shifting river systems gradually altered the region's water supply, making sustained settlement increasingly difficult. Others point to broader climatic fluctuations affecting agriculture across the Indus Valley. Unlike dramatic tales of sudden catastrophe, the archaeological record suggests a more gradual transformation, where environmental pressures slowly reshaped human choices over generations. Even so, unanswered questions remain. Did every family leave willingly as conditions changed, or did some remain until life became impossible? How did the people of Kalibangan interpret the gradual disappearance of the river upon which their community depended? Without written records that can be understood, archaeology reconstructs events through walls, pottery, and abandoned streets rather than personal testimony. Beyond mainstream scholarship, Kalibangan has naturally inspired broader speculation. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have suggested that unexplored sections of the site may preserve additional ceremonial structures capable of clarifying the purpose of the fire altars. Others wonder whether undiscovered inscriptions could eventually provide clues leading toward the decipherment of the Indus script. A few fringe theories even propose that the settlement possessed astronomical functions reflected in its urban layout, though current archaeological evidence supports practical planning rather than extraordinary claims. These ideas remain unverified, yet they illustrate how the silence surrounding the civilization continues to invite curiosity. As the evening wind moves gently across the ancient streets, Kalibangan feels both familiar and distant. Its carefully planned neighborhoods resemble the foundations of any organized city. Yet the people who designed them remain largely anonymous, their written words still locked behind an undeciphered script. Every exposed wall reveals remarkable achievement, while every unread inscription reminds us how much of their world remains hidden. Perhaps somewhere beneath the remaining layers of earth lies the discovery that will finally allow this silent city to speak once more. If Kalibangan leaves us contemplating a civilization whose written voice remains undeciphered, our journey now returns to the vast plains of ancient Khwarezm, where architecture itself poses the questions. Here, geometry replaces language. A perfectly circular fortress rises from the desert with such unusual precision that even after centuries of study, its original purpose continues to invite careful debate. Across the broad plains of present-day Uzbekistan, where the remnants of ancient irrigation canals still trace faint lines through the earth, the ruins of Krylgan Kala emerge in striking isolation. Unlike the rectangular fortresses that dominate much of the region, this monument immediately distinguishes itself through its shape. From above, the site appears as an immense circle enclosed by defensive walls, with a towering central structure surrounded by concentric architectural features. Against the open landscape, its symmetry feels almost deliberate enough to seem symbolic, inviting questions long before its history is fully understood. Built between the 4th and 3rd centuries BC and occupied through later centuries, Krylgan Kala belonged to the flourishing civilization of ancient Khwarezm. This kingdom developed sophisticated agriculture through carefully engineered irrigation systems that transformed otherwise arid land into productive farmland. Fortified cities, ceremonial centers, and administrative complexes spread across the oasis, creating one of Central Asia's most remarkable cultural landscapes. Within that network, however, Krylgan Kala has always occupied a distinctive place because no other known structure closely resembles its remarkable design. The site's most prominent feature is its circular central building, originally rising several stories above the surrounding plain. Thick mud brick walls enclosed a carefully organized interior, divided into multiple chambers connected by corridors. Around this central tower stretched an outer defensive wall, reinforced with regularly spaced towers, creating a layered arrangement that appears both practical and highly intentional. Every aspect of the plan reflects careful engineering, yet the exact function of the complex remains surprisingly difficult to define. Early archaeologists proposed that Krylgan Kala served primarily as a fortress protecting nearby agricultural communities. Its elevated position and substantial defenses certainly support that interpretation. From its upper levels, guards would have enjoyed commanding views across the surrounding countryside, allowing early detection of approaching travelers or potential threats. Defensive architecture was an essential feature of many Khwarezmian settlements, and this monument shares several characteristics with other fortified sites throughout the region. Yet other discoveries complicate that straightforward explanation. Excavations uncovered richly decorated ceramics, sculptures, inscriptions, coins, and human burials, suggesting that the structure fulfilled purposes extending well beyond military defense. Certain rooms appear unusually formal, while the distribution of artifacts indicates ceremonial activities that may have continued across generations. These findings encouraged archaeologists to consider whether the monument functioned simultaneously as a fortress, dynastic memorial, religious sanctuary, and administrative center. One particularly intriguing interpretation views the central structure as a royal mausoleum or ceremonial complex associated with the rulers of Khwarezm. Human remains discovered within the site, together with ritual objects and carefully planned architectural spaces, suggest that funerary traditions may have played an important role. If so, Krylgan Kala would represent a remarkable fusion of defensive architecture and sacred symbolism, where political authority and religious belief became inseparable within the same monumental structure. The building's circular design has attracted special attention for decades. Circular monumental architecture is comparatively uncommon in the region, making its choice especially significant. Was the shape selected simply for structural efficiency, or did it carry deeper symbolic meaning? Some scholars have suggested that the circle reflected concepts of cosmic order, kingship, or ritual space deeply embedded within Khwarezmian culture. While such interpretations remain plausible, the available evidence stops short of providing definitive answers. Astronomy has also entered the discussion, though with considerable caution. Because portions of the structure appear oriented with notable precision, a number of researchers have explored whether certain architectural features aligned with significant solar or celestial events. Some observations suggest intriguing possibilities, particularly concerning the movement of sunlight through specific spaces during particular seasons. However, no scholarly consensus has emerged demonstrating that the monument functioned primarily as an observatory. Most archaeologists continue to regard any astronomical role as secondary, if it existed at all. Even after decades of excavation, substantial mysteries remain. Much of the surrounding landscape has yet to be investigated using modern archaeological techniques. Ancient irrigation systems, satellite settlements, and associated structures may still lie hidden beneath accumulated sediment. Every new survey has expanded understanding of the broader Khwarezmian world, suggesting that Krylgan Kala was part of a far more extensive cultural network than earlier generations imagined. Beyond mainstream archaeology, the site's unusual architecture has naturally inspired broader speculation. Some researchers outside conventional scholarship have proposed that undiscovered underground chambers still exist beneath the central tower, preserving royal archives or ceremonial objects sealed during times of political upheaval. Others have suggested that the circular layout encoded sophisticated astronomical knowledge expressed through architecture rather than written records. A few fringe theories even imagine that the monument served as a meeting place where science, religion, and governance were deliberately united within a single, sacred landscape. None of these proposals has been verified through archaeological evidence, and most remain highly speculative. Nevertheless, the monument's uncommon design continues to encourage questions that conventional interpretations do not completely resolve. Standing within the weathered remains today, the silence feels unusually complete. The circular walls no longer protect kings or priests, yet their geometry still commands attention with quiet confidence. Every chamber hints at forgotten ceremonies. Every corridor suggests movements repeated countless times before disappearing into history. Krylgan Kala has revealed enough to demonstrate the remarkable sophistication of the civilization that built it, but not enough to explain why they chose this extraordinary design above all others. And perhaps somewhere beneath the remaining layers of earth, another hidden room, another inscription, or another carefully placed artifact still waits to reveal whether this enigmatic monument guarded far more than the walls visible today. If Krylgan Kala reminds us that architecture can preserve unanswered questions long after its builders have disappeared, the next destination presents an even more poignant mystery. Here, the ancient settlement no longer rises above the landscape at all. Much of it now rests beneath the waters of a modern reservoir, leaving archaeology to reconstruct its story from discoveries made just before the past slipped permanently out of sight. Before the waters of the Kamen Dam transformed the valley, Norşuntepe stood quietly along the upper reaches of the Euphrates in eastern Turkey. The mound overlooked fertile plains framed by rugged hills, where seasonal rivers nourished generations of farmers and traders. For thousands of years, the settlement occupied a strategic position linking Anatolia with northern Mesopotamia and the Caucasus. Today, much of that landscape lies submerged, making Norşuntepe not only an archaeological site, but also a reminder of how fragile humanity's oldest records can be. Rescue excavations carried out during the 20th century revealed that the mound contained an extraordinary sequence of occupation extending from the Chalcolithic period into the Bronze Age and beyond. Layer after layer preserved evidence of communities adapting to changing technologies, political systems, and regional networks. Every excavation trench exposed another chapter in a story spanning several millennia, allowing researchers to document a settlement whose importance had remained hidden beneath the earth for thousands of years. Among the earliest discoveries were modest mud brick houses, storage areas, ovens, and everyday tools belonging to farming communities that gradually transformed the surrounding landscape through agriculture. Stone axes, grinding stones, ceramic vessels, and carefully planned domestic spaces reveal lives centered on cultivation, craftsmanship, and cooperation. These earliest inhabitants left no written records, yet the organization of their settlement reflects a society already developing increasingly sophisticated ways of managing resources and communal life. As the centuries passed, Norşuntepe underwent remarkable transformation. During the Chalcolithic period, evidence of copperworking began to appear with growing frequency. Furnaces, crucibles, molds, slag, and finished metal objects demonstrate that the settlement became an important center for early metallurgy. Archaeologists regard Norşuntepe as one of the significant sites illustrating the gradual emergence of metal production in Anatolia. Rather than simply adopting imported technology, its craftspeople appear to have actively refined techniques that would influence later generations. The metallurgical evidence remains particularly compelling. Copper ores extracted from nearby regions were smelted and shaped into practical tools, ornaments, and weapons through carefully controlled processes requiring considerable skill. These workshops suggest not only technical knowledge but also organized labor, access to raw materials, and systems of exchange extending well beyond the immediate settlement. Every fragment of slag and every broken mold hints at industries that quietly reshaped ancient society long before iron transformed the ancient world. The settlement continued to flourish into the early and middle Bronze Age, when larger public buildings, defensive structures, and administrative spaces began to emerge. Architectural remains indicate increasing social complexity, while imported materials reveal expanding commercial connections. Norşuntepe occupied an advantageous location where ideas, goods, and people moved between diverse cultural regions. It became more than a village. It evolved into an important participant within the broader networks of the ancient Near East. Excavations also uncovered temples or ceremonial buildings whose exact functions remain open to interpretation. Certain rooms contained carefully arranged installations, unusual artifacts, and architectural features distinct from ordinary domestic spaces. Were these places devoted to religious rituals, communal gatherings, political authority, or perhaps several purposes simultaneously? Archaeologists continue to examine the evidence. Recognizing that ancient societies often blurred distinctions, modern observers tend to separate. One of the most fascinating aspects of Norşuntepe is the continuity visible throughout its occupational layers. Rather than experiencing a single dramatic rise or collapse, the settlement repeatedly adapted to changing circumstances. New buildings rose upon older foundations, technologies evolved gradually, and external influences blended with long-established local traditions. This resilience reflects a community capable of responding to shifting political landscapes without entirely abandoning its cultural identity. Yet the site also presents profound limitations. Because much of Norşuntepe now lies beneath the reservoir, future excavations are severely restricted. Archaeologists documented as much as possible before flooding began, but countless structures undoubtedly remain beyond reach. Entire neighborhoods, workshops, shrines, and perhaps written archives may still rest beneath the water, preserved yet inaccessible. Few archaeological sites illustrate so vividly the balance between discovery and irreversible loss. Beyond conventional scholarship, Norşuntepe has naturally inspired broader speculation. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have suggested that submerged portions of the mound may contain larger ceremonial complexes than those already uncovered. Others wonder whether undiscovered administrative buildings once preserved written records capable of clarifying the political role the settlement played within Bronze Age Anatolia. A few fringe theories even propose that the site's advanced metallurgical tradition reflected specialized knowledge transmitted through networks still only partially understood. While such ideas remain unverified, the inability to investigate the submerged portions ensures that certain questions may remain unanswered for generations. Standing today along the shoreline where the ancient settlement once overlooked the Euphrates, it is impossible not to reflect on the layers that remain hidden beneath the calm surface. The water conceals streets once filled with conversation, workshops once glowing with molten copper, and buildings where decisions shaped countless lives. Norşuntepe has already revealed an extraordinary chapter in the story of early civilization, yet much of its history now rests beyond the reach of excavation. Perhaps its greatest mystery is not what archaeologists have uncovered, but what still survives silently beneath the reservoir, waiting in darkness where time has paused, but memory has not entirely disappeared. If Norşuntepe reminds us that entire settlements can disappear beneath water while preserving their mysteries in silence, the next destination carries us to an island where the questions are written not beneath the earth, but upon towering stones that have stood through centuries of wind, rain, and forgotten memory. Here, the landscape itself seems to pause around monuments whose purpose remains only partially understood. High in the forested hills of Badrulchau, the largest island of Palau, The Badrulchau stone monoliths stand in quiet isolation. Thick tropical vegetation surrounds the site, while shafts of sunlight filter through towering trees, illuminating rows of massive basalt pillars rising from the earth. Moss clings to their weathered surfaces. Vines weave slowly around their edges. The forest seems to have accepted these stones as permanent inhabitants, although no one can say with complete confidence why they were first placed here or what ceremonies once unfolded among them. At first glance, the monoliths appear almost architectural. Some stand upright in carefully arranged rows, while others lie where they fell long ago, their immense weight still impressive despite centuries of erosion. Many measure several meters in height and weigh many tons, yet they were transported and erected without modern machinery. The effort required to quarry, move, and position such enormous blocks would have demanded remarkable organization, planning, and cooperation from the community that created them. Archaeologists generally believe the Badrulchau complex dates to the late prehistoric period, though establishing precise dates has proven difficult. Unlike civilizations that left extensive written records, the builders of these monuments relied primarily on oral tradition. Over countless generations, stories changed, merged, and sometimes disappeared entirely, leaving archaeology to reconstruct history through stone, soil, and scattered artifacts rather than written testimony. Excavations around the site have uncovered pottery fragments, shell remains, charcoal, and traces of human occupation, indicating that the area once supported ceremonial or communal activity. Yet the stones themselves remain the greatest source of fascination. Their arrangement appears too deliberate to be accidental, suggesting that they formed part of a carefully planned complex whose original purpose extended beyond simple construction. One widely accepted interpretation identifies the monoliths as the foundation supports for an elevated meeting house, sometimes referred to in Palawan tradition as a bai. In this view, enormous wooden beams would once have rested across the tops of the pillars, supporting an impressive communal structure where political discussions, ceremonies, and important gatherings took place. Similar architectural traditions continued in later periods, lending credibility to this explanation. Even so, no complete superstructure survives, leaving archaeologists to reconstruct its appearance from comparison, excavation, and tradition. Local legends introduce another layer of mystery. Some stories describe the stones as the work of extraordinary ancestors whose abilities seemed almost beyond ordinary human limits. Others speak of supernatural beings assisting in their construction or transporting the monoliths across difficult terrain through powers no longer remembered. Such narratives are not treated by scholars as historical evidence, yet they reveal how profoundly the monuments shaped the cultural imagination of later generations. The engineering itself continues to invite admiration. Transporting basalt pillars through dense tropical landscapes would have required careful coordination and sophisticated practical knowledge. Without written instructions or preserved tools explaining the process, modern researchers continue debating the precise methods employed. Wooden rollers, earthen ramps, rope systems, and coordinated labor all remain plausible components of the construction process, though no single explanation answers every question. The surrounding environment also contributes to the site's atmosphere. Unlike monuments standing within open plains or deserts, the Badrulchau monoliths exist within a living forest that constantly reclaims abandoned spaces. Roots slowly wrap around fallen stones. Leaves accumulate where ceremonies may once have taken place. The natural world neither conceals nor reveals the monument completely, instead preserving it within a landscape that feels timeless. Despite decades of study, many aspects of the complex remain uncertain. Was Badrulchau primarily a political center, a ceremonial sanctuary, a place of ancestral remembrance, or a combination of all three? Were additional wooden structures once arranged around the monoliths, creating a far larger complex than what survives today. Archaeological evidence offers valuable clues, but the disappearance of organic materials ensures that important details remain permanently elusive. Beyond conventional archaeology, the site has naturally inspired broader speculation. Some researchers outside mainstream scholarship have suggested that additional buried monoliths still lie hidden beneath centuries of accumulated soil and vegetation, awaiting future excavation. Others have wondered whether the arrangement of the stones reflects celestial observations or seasonal alignments that guided ceremonial events. A few fringe theories go even further, proposing that the remarkable effort invested in the monument hints at forgotten knowledge or social organization more sophisticated than traditionally recognized. None of these ideas has been confirmed through archaeological evidence, yet the unusual character of the site continues to encourage thoughtful exploration. Standing quietly among the towering pillars today, it becomes easy to understand why the Badrulchau stone monoliths continue to inspire both careful scientific study and enduring wonder. Every weathered surface bears witness to generations that left almost no written history, yet accomplished feats that still command respect. The silence between the stones feels almost intentional, as though the monument continues guarding memories too old for language itself. And somewhere beneath the forest floor, beneath roots, fallen leaves, and centuries of patient growth, there may still rest another piece of the story, waiting for the moment when the earth decides to reveal it. If the Badrulchau stone monoliths remind us that forests can quietly preserve the ambitions of forgotten builders, the next destination carries us farther into the Pacific, where the sea itself has become the guardian of an ancient city. Here, stone walls rise from a tropical island surrounded by coral reefs, while the tides erase and reveal the past with every passing day. It is a place where history, legend, and the rhythm of the ocean have become inseparable. Hidden within the lush mangrove forests of Khosri in the Federated States of Micronesia, the Lelu Ruins emerge gradually from the dense vegetation. Narrow channels weave between the shoreline and the island, while towering breadfruit trees, palms, and banyans cast shifting shadows across weathered stone walls. The air is filled with the sound of birds and the distant movement of waves beyond the reef. At first glance, the ruins seem almost absorbed by nature. Yet, as the forest begins to open, carefully constructed roads, platforms, canals, and massive basalt walls reveal the remains of one of the most remarkable ancient cities in Oceania. Centuries ago, Lelu served as the political and ceremonial heart of the kingdom of Khosrau. Most archaeologists believe the city reached its height between the 13th and early 19th centuries, functioning as the residence of powerful rulers whose authority extended across the island. Unlike many ancient capitals built beside rivers or fertile plains, Lelu occupied a small coral island connected to the mainland by narrow waterways, creating a naturally protected center of administration, ceremony, and elite residence. The first impression is one of extraordinary planning. Stone causeways divide the settlement into carefully organized districts. High basalt walls define residential compounds, ceremonial enclosures, and public spaces with remarkable precision. Some walls rise more than 4 meters high and consist of enormous basalt columns stacked horizontally with impressive skill. The precision of the construction continues to attract admiration, especially considering that the builders worked without metal machinery or modern engineering equipment. The basalt itself presents one of the site's most intriguing questions. Geological studies indicate that much of the stone originated from volcanic outcrops elsewhere on Khosri rather than directly beneath the city. Transporting these massive columns across difficult terrain and coastal waters would have required careful coordination, specialized knowledge, and substantial labor. Whether moved by rafts, canoes, wooden rollers, or combinations of several techniques, the process reflects remarkable logistical organization within a society often underestimated in earlier historical narratives. Within the city, excavations have uncovered evidence of elite residences, cooking areas, ceremonial platforms, and burial locations. Artifacts including shell ornaments, stone tools, fishing equipment, pottery fragments, and imported materials reveal a community deeply connected to both the surrounding ocean and wider Pacific exchange networks. Lelu was never isolated. Instead, it participated in long-distance relationships, linking island societies through trade, diplomacy, marriage, and navigation across immense stretches of open water. The layout of the city also reflects a highly organized social structure. Certain compounds were clearly reserved for rulers and high-ranking families, while other areas supported craftsmen, attendants, and daily economic activities. Access to important spaces appears carefully controlled through gates, walls, and narrow passages, suggesting that architecture itself reinforced political authority. Every movement through the city may have carried social meaning, guiding visitors toward spaces appropriate to their status. Religion almost certainly played a central role within Lelu, although many details remain uncertain. Oral traditions speak of sacred places, ancestral spirits, and ceremonies that reinforce the legitimacy of rulers. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of ritual activity, yet the specific beliefs practiced within the stone enclosures remain only partially understood. Without written records describing ceremonies in detail, researchers must interpret architecture, artifacts, and local traditions together, recognizing both their value and their limitations. One of the most fascinating aspects of Lelu is how seamlessly its builders integrated the city into the surrounding environment. Canals allowed movement by canoe through portions of the settlement, while the nearby lagoon provided food, transportation, and protection. Rather than imposing an artificial landscape upon nature, the city appears designed to cooperate with tides, reefs, and waterways. This harmony between architecture and environment reflects generations of accumulated local knowledge rather than accidental adaptation. Despite extensive archaeological work, much of Lelu remains unexplored. Dense vegetation conceals additional foundations, while certain areas have received only limited excavation. Organic materials that once formed roofs, ceremonial buildings, and wooden structures have largely disappeared, leaving only the enduring basalt framework behind. Every surviving wall therefore represents only part of the original city, its missing elements requiring careful reconstruction through archaeological evidence and comparison with surviving Pacific traditions. Beyond mainstream scholarship, the ruins have naturally inspired broader speculation. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have suggested that hidden ceremonial compounds still lie concealed beneath the forest, protected by centuries of accumulated vegetation. Others have proposed that submerged structures may exist along the ancient shoreline, now hidden beneath changing sea levels and coral growth. A few fringe theories imagine that Lelu formed part of a wider network of monumental Pacific centers whose political and navigational sophistication exceeded what is currently recognized, while archaeological evidence confirms extensive regional interaction. More extraordinary claims remain unverified and continue to be approached with appropriate caution. Local traditions also contribute to the enduring mystery of the city. Stories passed through generations describe powerful chiefs, sacred stones, and ancestral forces connected to particular places within the ruins. These narratives are not regarded as literal historical accounts by archaeologists, yet they preserve valuable cultural memory, offering insight into how later communities understood the significance of the ancient capital. In many ways, the legends become another layer of archaeology, not excavated from the earth, but preserved through human memory. as daylight slowly fades beneath the forest canopy. The basalt walls seem to absorb the changing light without surrendering their silence. Narrow pathways disappear into tangled vegetation, while the nearby lagoon reflects the sky with remarkable stillness. Every stone appears deliberately placed, every enclosure suggests forgotten ceremonies, and every unopened section of the ruins hints at discoveries yet to come. Lelu has already transformed our understanding of ancient Pacific societies, revealing a level of political organization, engineering, and architectural achievement once overlooked by the wider world. Yet, the city continues to withhold part of its story. Somewhere beneath roots, coral, and centuries of quiet growth, another foundation, another artifact, or another forgotten passage may still wait patiently, preserving answers to questions that have echoed across the island for generations. If the silent avenues of Lelu reveal how an island kingdom preserved its authority through carefully planned stone architecture, the next destination presents an entirely different kind of monument. Rising alone above the desert, it was never designed to shelter the living. Instead, it stood between life and death, where ritual, faith, and the endless sky came together in one of the ancient world's most unusual structures. On the edge of the Kizilkum Desert in present-day Karakalpakstan, Uzbekistan, a solitary circular tower dominates a limestone ridge overlooking the broad Amu Darya Valley. Known today as Chilpik Tower, its weathered walls rise from the barren landscape like the remains of an ancient fortress abandoned by time. From a distance, the structure appears defensive, its thick mud brick walls forming a near-perfect circle against the pale desert horizon. Yet, the closer one approaches, the more its unusual design begins to challenge that first impression. The hill itself commands remarkable views in every direction. Endless plains stretch toward distant mountains, while shifting light transforms the surrounding desert from brilliant gold to deep crimson as the sun moves across the sky. Wind sweeps continuously over the exposed ridge, carrying little except silence. It is a place where isolation feels almost intentional, as though the builders deliberately chose a location suspended between earth and sky. Archaeologists generally date the construction of Chilpik Tower to around the 1st centuries BC or the early centuries AD, during the flourishing period of ancient Khwarezm. At the time, this oasis civilization controlled a network of fortified cities sustained by sophisticated irrigation systems that transformed the surrounding desert into productive agricultural land. Although Khwarezm became known for its impressive fortresses and thriving settlements, Chilpik has always occupied a unique position within its architectural landscape. At first glance, many early travelers assumed the monument had served as a military fortress or watchtower. Its elevated location, massive circular wall, and commanding views certainly supported that interpretation. A structure placed on such a strategic hill could easily monitor movement across the surrounding plains. Yet, archaeological investigation gradually revealed that its true purpose was likely far more unusual. Today, the prevailing interpretation identifies Chilpik as a dakma, often called a tower of silence, associated with ancient Zoroastrian funerary tradition. According to long-established religious beliefs, earth, fire, and water were considered sacred elements that should not be contaminated by decomposing human remains. Instead of burial or cremation, the deceased were placed upon elevated platforms where natural processes assisted by scavenging birds allowed the body to return to nature without polluting the elements. After exposure, the remaining bones were carefully collected and sometimes transferred elsewhere for final deposition. This interpretation explains several unusual architectural features. The circular enclosure provided a protected ritual space rather than living quarters. The open interior offered exposure to sunlight and birds, while the elevated position encouraged natural air circulation. Unlike conventional tombs, Chilpik was never intended to preserve bodies. Instead, it reflected a spiritual philosophy emphasizing purification, transformation, and harmony between humanity and the natural world. Even within this widely accepted framework, important uncertainties remain. The surviving structure has experienced centuries of erosion, reconstruction, and reuse, making it difficult to determine precisely how the original monument appeared. Some portions of the walls may have been modified during later occupations, while erosion has removed architectural details that could once have clarified its function. Every missing section leaves room for careful interpretation. The surrounding region provides additional context. Ancient Khwarizm stood at the crossroads of powerful civilizations, interacting with Persian, Central Asian, and later Hellenistic influences. Religious traditions evolved alongside political change, and archaeological evidence suggests that Zoroastrian practices varied across both time and geography. Chilpik therefore offers a rare opportunity to examine how one community expressed beliefs that survive only fragmentarily within the archaeological record. Excavations conducted around the hill have recovered pottery, architectural fragments, and evidence of repeated human activity extending across many centuries. Some researchers believe the site continued to hold symbolic importance even after its original funerary function declined. Local populations may have reused or respected the monument long after its initial purpose had faded from collective memory, allowing layers of history to accumulate around the ancient structure. The tower's commanding position has also contributed to its enduring reputation. Standing atop the ridge, visitors often describe an unusual sense of stillness. With little vegetation to interrupt the view, the monument appears detached from ordinary human settlement. Whether this isolation carried religious meaning or simply reflected practical considerations remains difficult to determine, but its psychological effect is undeniable. The architecture seems designed to separate sacred ritual from everyday life. Local folklore adds another dimension to the mystery. Over generations, stories emerged describing the tower as the home of spirits, forgotten rulers, or supernatural guardians watching over the desert. Some legends speak of hidden chambers beneath the hill, while others claim that mysterious lights occasionally appeared near the ruins after sunset. Such traditions cannot be treated as historical evidence, yet they illustrate how profoundly the monument has shaped the imagination of surrounding communities. The circular design itself continues to attract scholarly interest. Unlike rectangular defensive forts common throughout ancient Khwarizm, Chilpik's geometry appears carefully adapted to ritual rather than warfare. The absence of substantial domestic remains further supports ceremonial interpretation. Nevertheless, archaeology rarely provides absolute certainty. Some researchers continue exploring whether the monument may have served additional purposes during different periods of its long history. Beyond mainstream scholarship, Chilpik has inspired a wide range of speculative interpretations. Some researchers outside conventional archaeology have suggested that the hill concealed underground ceremonial chambers connected to the tower through now collapsed passages. Others have proposed that the circular enclosure was deliberately aligned with significant solar events, transforming funerary ritual into a symbolic dialogue between the dead and the heavens. A few fringe theories go even further, arguing that the monument functioned simultaneously as an astronomical observation platform, sacred temple, and initiation center for priestly elites. None of these ideas has been verified through archaeological evidence, and current research continues to favor the interpretation of Chilpik as a Zoroastrian funerary monument. Even so, the structure's unusual architecture and commanding position ensure that alternative possibilities continue to attract thoughtful discussion. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in what Chilpik was, but in what it meant to those who climbed its hill nearly 2,000 years ago. Imagine a solemn procession ascending the ridge beneath an open sky, carrying a loved one toward a place where death was understood not as an ending, but as a carefully ordered return to the natural world. The silence of the landscape would have become part of the ceremony itself, while the endless horizon reminded every participant of forces far greater than any individual life. Today, the tower still watches over the desert exactly as it has for centuries. Its weathered walls no longer witness ancient rituals, yet they continue to provoke questions that archaeology can answer only in part. Every stone speaks of belief. Every missing fragment invites interpretation, and every gust of wind crossing the empty enclosure seems to carry echoes from a civilization whose spiritual world remains only partially understood. Somewhere within the remaining layers of the hill, or perhaps within the traditions that history failed to preserve, there may still exist another clue capable of revealing why this lonely monument has endured as one of Central Asia's most haunting archaeological mysteries. If Chilpik Tower reveals how ancient societies transformed landscapes into places of spiritual meaning, the next destination brings us to a city where stone streets, public buildings, and forgotten monuments preserve the complexity of everyday life in the ancient world. Here, the mystery does not rise from a single unusual structure, but from an entire city frozen in silence, a place that once echoed with political debates, commercial exchanges, theatrical performances, and the footsteps of thousands of inhabitants. In the rolling countryside of northern Bulgaria, near the modern village of Nicopolis, the ruins of Nicopolis ad Istrum stretch across a wide valley surrounded by fields and distant hills. At first glance, the landscape appears peaceful and almost untouched. Grass moves gently across open spaces where ancient streets once crossed, while fragments of marble and stone emerge from the earth like scattered memories. There are no towering monuments dominating the horizon, no massive walls announcing the presence of an imperial city. Instead, the remains of Nicopolis ad Istrum reveal themselves gradually, inviting visitors to imagine the complex urban world that once existed here. Founded around AD 102 by the Roman Emperor Trajan, the city was established to commemorate a Roman victory over the Dacians. Its name, meaning City of Victory on the Ister, reflected both military triumph and imperial ambition. Positioned near the Yantra River, a tributary of the Danube, the settlement occupied a strategic location connecting important routes across the Balkans. It became part of the Roman province of Moesia Inferior, and later developed into one of the region's most significant urban centers. Unlike many Roman settlements created solely as military outposts, Nicopolis ad Istrum evolved into a thriving civilian city. Its carefully planned streets followed the traditional Roman grid system, with intersecting avenues dividing neighborhoods into organized blocks. Beneath these streets, advanced drainage systems carried away wastewater, while public fountains and water channels supplied residents with essential resources. The city's design reflected Roman ideas of order, efficiency, and civic life, transforming a provincial settlement into a sophisticated urban environment. Walking through the ruins today, one can still recognize the foundations of a remarkable public center. A large forum once served as the heart of political and social activity, surrounded by colonnaded buildings, administrative offices, and spaces dedicated to commerce. Here, citizens gathered to discuss public matters, conduct business, and participate in ceremonies that reinforce the identity of the community. One of the most impressive discoveries at Nicopolis ad Istrum is its theater, where performances brought together different layers of society. The theater was not simply a place of entertainment. Throughout the Roman world, such spaces functioned as important social institutions where mythology, politics, and cultural traditions were presented before large audiences. The voices of actors, musicians, and speakers once filled the same spaces that now stand silent beneath the open sky. The city's architecture reveals a fascinating blend of Roman and local influences. Marble sculptures, inscriptions, architectural decorations, and religious objects demonstrate how communities across the empire adapted Roman traditions while maintaining regional identities. Temples dedicated to Roman gods stood alongside evidence of local beliefs, creating a cultural landscape where different traditions interacted rather than simply replacing one another. Among the most intriguing discoveries are the numerous inscriptions found throughout the site. These texts preserve names of officials, citizens, religious figures, and benefactors who contributed to the city's development. They offer rare glimpses into individual lives that would otherwise have disappeared completely. A single inscription carved into stone can transform an anonymous ruin into a place connected to real people who lived, worked, worshipped, and struggled within the city. Yet, despite the wealth of archaeological evidence, many questions remain unanswered. How did ordinary residents experience daily life within Nicopolis ad Istrum? What conversations took place in its markets and public spaces? How did different cultural groups negotiate their identities within a city shaped by Roman power, but located far from the traditional centers of the empire? The city's economic role also continues to attract research. Archaeological findings indicate that Nicopolis ad Istrum participated in regional trade networks, producing and exchanging goods that connected it with neighboring settlements and distant provinces. Pottery workshops, metalworking facilities, and agricultural activity supported the city's population, while imported objects reveal connections extending across the Roman world. One particularly fascinating aspect of Nicopolis ad Istrum is its apparent intellectual and cultural importance. The city became associated with figures connected to philosophy, literature, and education during the Roman period. The presence of sophisticated architecture, public monuments, and inscriptions suggests a community that valued learning and civic participation. In a distant provincial landscape, the city reflected many of the cultural ambitions usually associated with larger imperial centers. However, like many ancient cities, Nicopolis ad Istrum experienced dramatic changes over time. The gradual decline of Roman authority in the Balkans affected trade, security, and political stability. Invasions, economic pressures, and shifting populations transformed the region. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city continued to exist for centuries after its foundation, but its urban character slowly changed. Large public buildings lost their original functions, streets became quieter, and spaces once filled with civic activity were gradually abandoned. The final centuries of occupation remain especially intriguing. Unlike cities destroyed in a single catastrophic event, Nicopolis ad Istrum appears to have faded through a long process of transformation. The reasons behind this decline involve multiple factors rather than one dramatic moment. Environmental changes, political instability, and changing patterns of settlement all likely contributed to the city's eventual disappearance as a major urban center. The ruins also preserve traces of early Christianity, reflecting the transformation of the Roman world during late antiquity. Churches replaced some earlier structures, and religious practices changed as Christianity became increasingly influential. These layers demonstrate that Nicopolis ad Istrum was not a static monument, but a living city that continually adapted to new realities. The presence of both pagan and Christian remains creates a fascinating archaeological conversation. How did residents experience these religious changes? Were older traditions abandoned completely, or did elements of previous beliefs survive within new forms of worship? The stones cannot provide direct answers, but they preserve evidence of a society undergoing profound cultural transformation. Beyond mainstream archaeology, the city's forgotten spaces have naturally encouraged speculation. Some researchers outside conventional scholarship have wondered whether unexplored underground areas beneath the ruins may contain additional archives, hidden chambers, or forgotten structures capable of revealing more about the city's final centuries. Others have suggested that certain architectural alignments may reflect deeper symbolic planning connected to Roman cosmology or ceremonial traditions. A few fringe interpretations imagine that Nicopolis ad Istrum preserved secret knowledge networks extending beyond ordinary civic functions. These ideas remain unsupported by archaeological evidence, yet the incomplete nature of the surviving city ensures that curiosity continues. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Nicopolis ad Istrum is not why it was built, but how an entire human world could disappear so completely while leaving behind only fragments. Every broken column once supported a roof. Every worn street once carried conversations. Every inscription once represented a person who believed their name and achievements would endure. Today, the city exists in a state between presence and absence. The foundations remain, but the sounds are gone. The buildings can be mapped, but the emotions of those who lived within them remain beyond reach. Archaeology can reveal where people walked, what they built, and how they organized their society, yet it cannot fully recover the thoughts of those who looked upon the same streets centuries ago. As the sun moves across the ruins and shadows stretch between ancient walls, Nicopolis ad Istrum becomes more than a Roman city preserved in stone. It becomes a reminder of how temporary even the greatest human achievements can be. Empires expand, cities rise, cultures transform, and eventually silence returns. Yet, beneath the grass and scattered stones, countless stories remain waiting, perhaps not lost forever, but patiently waiting for another discovery to bring them back into the light. If Nicopolis ad Istrum reveals how entire cities can preserve the echoes of forgotten societies, the next destination takes us away from streets and public monuments into a quieter landscape, where the traces of ancient lives are found not in buildings, but in the final places chosen for remembrance. Here, the mystery is written into the earth itself, where graves, rituals, and carefully placed objects provide a rare glimpse into how ancient communities understood identity, belief, and the journey beyond life. Along the northern coast of Bulgaria, where the Black Sea meets the rugged cliffs of the Dobruja region, the landscape around Kamen Bryag stretches beneath an endless horizon. The wind moves constantly across open fields, carrying the scent of the sea over limestone plateaus and grassy plains. At first glance, the area appears untouched, a quiet meeting point between land and water. Yet, beneath this peaceful surface lies evidence of ancient human activity extending back thousands of years, including a remarkable prehistoric necropolis, whose discoveries continue to raise questions about the beliefs and practices of early European communities. Known as the Kamen Bryag necropolis, the site belongs to the broader archaeological landscape of northeastern Bulgaria, a region rich with prehistoric settlements, ritual structures, and burial grounds. Located near the Black Sea coast, this area occupied a unique position between inland agricultural communities and maritime networks that connected distant populations. The proximity to the sea was not only economically significant, but may also have influenced the symbolic world of the people who lived and buried their dead here. Archaeological investigations have revealed evidence of ancient burials containing human remains, pottery, tools, ornaments, and other objects carefully placed alongside the deceased. These discoveries suggest that burial was not simply a practical act, but a meaningful ritual shaped by ideas about ancestry, social identity, and the relationship between the living and the dead. The exact chronology of the Kamen Bryag necropolis is complex, as the region experienced repeated occupation throughout prehistory. Different cultural groups moved through and settled along the western Black Sea coast over thousands of years, leaving behind overlapping traces of their presence. The burial traditions discovered here reflect broader patterns found throughout ancient southeastern Europe, where communities developed increasingly elaborate ways of honoring their ancestors. One of the most fascinating aspects of prehistoric necropolises is the way they reveal information about societies that left behind little or no written evidence. A settlement shows where people lived, but a burial site often reveals what they valued. The objects placed beside the dead can indicate craftsmanship, trade connections, social differences, and symbolic beliefs that would otherwise remain invisible. At Kamen Bryag, pottery fragments provide important clues about technological skill and cultural connections. Handmade vessels, often decorated with distinctive patterns, were not merely functional objects. In many ancient societies, ceramics carried symbolic meaning and may have played important roles in funerary ceremonies. A single vessel placed beside a body could represent offerings, daily necessities for another existence, or a connection between the deceased and the community they left behind. Ornaments discovered in prehistoric burials offer another glimpse into ancient identity. Beads, personal decorations, and crafted objects suggest that appearance and social expression mattered even thousands of years ago. Such items may have represented status, family connections, age, gender roles, or personal achievements. However, interpreting these objects requires caution, as their original meanings belong to societies whose belief systems are only partially understood. The coastal setting adds another layer of intrigue. Throughout human history, shorelines have often carried symbolic importance. The meeting point between land and sea can represent transition, movement, and connection between different worlds. For ancient communities, the sea may have been viewed not only as a source of food and transportation, but also as a powerful natural force connected to mythology and spiritual beliefs. Researchers studying prehistoric Black Sea communities have long debated how these societies organized themselves. Some burial sites reveal significant differences between graves, suggesting emerging social hierarchies or specialized roles. Others appear more uniform, indicating communities where collective identity may have been emphasized over individual distinction. The evidence from Kamen Bryag contributes to this broader discussion, though many questions remain unanswered. Who were the people buried here? Were they farmers who lived in nearby settlements, travelers connected to coastal trade networks, or members of communities whose main centers have not yet been discovered? Did the location hold special significance because of its position near the sea, or was it chosen simply because of practical considerations such as available land and visibility across the landscape? The surrounding region contains many archaeological mysteries that demonstrate the complexity of prehistoric Europe. Nearby discoveries have shown that communities along the western Black Sea were capable of remarkable craftsmanship, long-distance exchange, and sophisticated ritual practices. Sites throughout the region reveal that these societies were far from simple or isolated. They participated in networks of communication and cultural exchange that connected distant populations centuries before the rise of classical civilizations. The study of ancient burial sites also reveals something deeply human. Despite enormous differences in technology and lifestyle, prehistoric communities shared a familiar concern: how to remember those who came before. The careful arrangement of bodies, the preparation of offerings, and the construction of burial spaces all suggest emotional connections that transcend time. The people who created these graves were not simply performing rituals. They were expressing relationships, memories, and beliefs about existence itself. Yet, the necropolis continues to hold unanswered questions. Many ancient burial sites have been disturbed by natural processes, agricultural activity, or later human presence, making reconstruction difficult. Organic materials that once accompanied the dead, wood, textiles, plants, and other offerings, often disappeared completely, leaving only fragments of the original ceremonies. The absence of written records creates both fascination and uncertainty. Archaeologists can analyze bones to understand health, diet, and ancestry. They can study artifacts to trace trade and craftsmanship. They can examine burial patterns to identify possible social structures. But the thoughts, fears, hopes, and personal stories of those buried remain beyond direct observation. Beyond conventional archaeology, the mysterious atmosphere of Kamen Bryag has naturally inspired broader interpretations. Some researchers outside mainstream scholarship have suggested that certain prehistoric coastal necropolises may have been positioned according to astronomical or seasonal patterns, reflecting deeper connections between burial rituals and celestial cycles. Others wonder whether unexplored areas near the site could contain additional ceremonial structures or older layers of occupation. A few fringe theories propose that coastal burial grounds like this one were part of a forgotten ritual tradition extending across vast regions of prehistoric Europe. While these ideas remain speculative and lack confirmation, they reflect the enduring fascination created by places where ancient people deliberately chose to confront questions of mortality and memory. The landscape itself seems to preserve part of the mystery. Standing near Kamen Bryag today, one can look across the same sea that ancient inhabitants saw thousands of years ago. The cliffs, winds, and horizon remain almost unchanged, creating a rare connection between the present and the distant past. Somewhere beneath the soil are the traces of individuals whose names have disappeared, but whose existence is still remembered through archaeology. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the Kamen Bryag necropolis is not simply how these people buried their dead, but what those ceremonies meant to them. Were they seeking to preserve family connections? Were they preparing loved ones for a journey beyond life? Were the objects placed beside the deceased symbols of belief, identity, or hope? The stones and artifacts provide fragments of answers, but the complete story remains beyond reach. The ancient people of Kamen Bryag left behind enough evidence to reveal that they cared deeply about remembrance, yet not enough to fully explain the world they imagined. And as the waves continue to strike the nearby cliffs and the wind moves across the ancient landscape, the necropolis remains a silent archive, holding memories of lives that ended thousands of years ago, but whose mysteries are still waiting to be understood. If the Kamen Bryag necropolis reveals how ancient communities preserved their beliefs through the careful treatment of the dead, the next destination returns us to the world of cities, armies, and imperial ambition. Here, the landscape does not hide forgotten lives beneath burial mounds, but instead preserves the remains of a frontier settlement where soldiers, administrators, and local communities existed together at the edge of one of history's greatest empires. Along the banks of the Krka River in modern Croatia, surrounded by the rugged beauty of the Dalmatian landscape, the ruins of Burnum rest quietly beneath open skies. Limestone hills rise around the valley, while the river winds through a region that once marked an important boundary between Roman authority and the diverse communities of the eastern Adriatic. Today, the site appears peaceful and almost empty, but nearly 2,000 years ago, this was a place of movement, discipline, and strategic importance. Burnum was originally established as a Roman military settlement, most likely during the 1st century A.D., in a region that had recently been incorporated into the Roman Empire. Its location was carefully chosen, positioned along important routes connecting the interior of Dalmatia with coastal regions. Burnum allowed Roman forces to monitor territory, control transportation networks, and maintain influence over a region that had experienced resistance to imperial expansion. Unlike the grand cities built to display Roman wealth and culture, Burnum represented another side of the empire, the frontier world where military power sustained political control. Here, the presence of soldiers shaped nearly every aspect of daily life. Roads, administrative buildings, supply systems, and public spaces developed around the needs of the army, creating a settlement where military organization and civilian existence became closely connected. The most recognizable remains of Burnum today are the impressive arches of its ancient military amphitheater. Rising from the landscape as weathered stone fragments, these structures offer a glimpse into the social world that existed beyond the battlefield. The amphitheater was not only a place of entertainment, but also a tool of cultural integration. Gladiatorial games, public ceremonies, and military gatherings helped reinforce Roman identity among soldiers and local populations. Imagine the scene centuries ago. Thousands of spectators gathering within the stone seating, soldiers watching alongside civilians, banners moving above the arena, and the sounds of public performances echoing through the valley. For a remote military settlement, such a structure represented more than leisure. It demonstrated permanence. Rome was not merely passing through, it was creating a lasting presence. Archaeological excavations have revealed the remains of military buildings, including parts of the legionary camp that once housed thousands of soldiers. Barracks, roads, storage areas, and administrative structures demonstrate the careful planning required to maintain a Roman military installation. The camp followed patterns seen throughout the empire, reflecting a standardized approach to organization that allowed Roman forces to operate effectively across distant territories. The soldiers stationed at Burnum were not simply warriors. They were engineers, builders, administrators, and participants in a complex social system. Roman legions constructed roads, bridges, and defensive structures while simultaneously spreading aspects of Roman culture. Their presence transformed the surrounding region, influencing local economies, settlement patterns, and cultural traditions. One of the most fascinating aspects of Burnum is the relationship between the Roman military and the indigenous communities of Dalmatia. Before Roman conquest, the region was inhabited by Illyrian peoples with their own traditions, languages, and social structures. The arrival of Rome did not erase these identities immediately. Instead, centuries of interaction produced a complex mixture of local and imperial influences. Artifacts discovered at the site reveal this cultural exchange. Roman coins, ceramics, inscriptions, weapons, and architectural fragments exist alongside evidence of regional traditions. Together, they illustrate a society in transition, where different identities interacted within the same landscape. The inscriptions found at Burnum are especially valuable because they preserve names and details of individuals who lived there. Military inscriptions often record the achievements of commanders, the dedication of monuments, or the presence of specific units. Through these fragments, archaeologists can reconstruct parts of the human story behind the ruins. A simple inscription carved into stone may reveal the name of a soldier who traveled thousands of kilometers from another province, spent years guarding Rome's frontier, and left behind a small trace of his existence. The strategic importance of Burnum continued for centuries. The Roman military presence changed over time as political conditions shifted throughout the empire. During periods of stability, the settlement functioned as a secure base. During times of conflict, it became a critical defensive position. Its history reflects the broader challenges faced by Rome as it attempted to maintain control over vast territories. Yet, the decline of Burnum remains a fascinating subject. Like many Roman frontier settlements, its importance gradually diminished as military priorities changed and imperial authority weakened. The reasons were not connected to a single dramatic event, but rather a combination of economic, political, and social transformations. As Rome entered periods of instability, frontier communities experienced changes that eventually led to abandonment or transformation. The ruins also preserve evidence of later occupation, demonstrating that the location remained meaningful even after the Roman military withdrew. New communities reused ancient structures, adapted existing spaces, and continued interacting with the landscape shaped by centuries of human activity. One of the enduring mysteries of Burnum is how much remains undiscovered. Archaeological investigations have revealed only portions of the ancient settlement. Beneath fields and vegetation may still lie additional structures, roads, and personal objects capable of expanding our understanding of life at this frontier outpost. Modern technologies such as aerial surveys and non-invasive scanning methods continue to reveal new information without disturbing the fragile remains. The military nature of Burnum has also inspired broader questions about the psychological experience of life on the frontier. What was it like for a soldier from distant parts of the empire to arrive in Dalmatia and spend years stationed far from home? How did local residents perceive the foreign power that reshaped their landscape? Did the amphitheater and public spaces truly create a shared Roman identity? Or did different communities continue maintaining separate traditions beneath the surface? These questions remind us that ancient settlements were not simply collections of buildings. They were places where individuals experienced ambition, fear, loyalty, conflict, and adaptation. The stones of Burnum preserve imperial history, but they also preserve ordinary human experiences that rarely appear in official records. Beyond mainstream archaeology, the atmosphere of Burnham has naturally encouraged speculation. Some researchers outside conventional scholarship have wondered whether unexplored sections of the site contain hidden military archives or forgotten structures that could reveal new details about Roman operations in Dalmatia. Others have suggested that certain features of the settlement may have carried symbolic meanings connected to Roman military rituals and imperial ideology. A few fringe interpretations imagine that frontier sites like Burnum contained secret knowledge systems used by Roman commanders to coordinate power across distant regions. These ideas remain unsupported by archaeological evidence, yet the incomplete nature of the surviving settlement ensures that curiosity continues. The landscape around Burnum creates a powerful connection between past and present. The same river continues flowing nearby. The same hills continue surrounding the valley. The difference is that the voices have disappeared. The soldiers who marched through the streets, the families who lived near the camp, the merchants who supplied the settlement, and the spectators who gathered in the amphitheater, all left behind only fragments. Standing among the ruins today, it is easy to imagine the contrast between the silence of the present and the activity of the ancient settlement. Where grass now grows, roads once carried movement. Where broken stones rest, buildings once represented authority. Where the amphitheater stands empty, crowds once gathered to witness spectacles that connected them to the wider Roman world.